Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. Jingle Bella, jingle all the way. Bella and her vamps were currently at her house decorating the tree that had been courtesy of Jasper and Emmett, nixing the tree lot that had been set up in an empty lot at the center of town. They had cut one down off their own property. They owned not only the house now, but a few acres behind it, and now the small living room was awash with the scent of fresh pine. Bella had always loved that scent. Nan had always insisted on a real tree during Christmas, but after she had died, Renee had switched to a fake one, claiming to be allergic to the scent of pine. After 6 years of fakeness, to finally have a real tree again brought back the memories of the Christmases she had loved when she was a kid, and not of the awkward and uncomfortable ones when she'd been a teenager. She knew she'd be adding this Christmas, her first one, with Jasper and her vampire family to the first list. If Emmett would stop mangling the Christmas carols that, up until he started changing any mention of bells to Bella, she loved. She rolled her eyes and finished looping the gold garland around the tree. Emmett had stopped being funny a week ago. He shrugged before ginning mischievously and suddenly produced a pair of dark sunglasses from the pocket of his baggy hoodie. Sliding them over his eyes, he began gyrating his hips enthusiastically, doing his best Justin Timberlake SNL impression. Every single holiday a dick in a box, Bella groaned. She should have known better than to discourage the Christmas carols. Emmett always had a backup. Perched on the edge of the couch, Rose patiently untangled the Christmas lights and without looking up, calmly said, "If you so much as think about coming down here on Christmas with a box over your crotch, you will find your dick in a box on its way to Guatemala." From behind them came the sound of a slamming door, followed by Charlie stepping into the living room, his uniform rumpled and a coffee cup paused halfway up to his lips. Sharp brown eyes warily took in Bella and Jasper laughing heartily, and Emmett with his hands protectively over his privates. "Do I even want to know?" "Just giving him a little advice on Christmas etiquette," Rose chirped. "Right," Charlie said with a frown. Bella grinned. She remembered a fight that had broken out at her old school, where these two guys were completely wailing on one another, fighting through the pain of what she would later find out was a broken nose on one and a busted hand on the other. It wasn't until one of the guys angled himself just right, or wrong in this case, and ended up getting a very powerful punch to the crotch, she swore she could hear the crunch, that the fight came to a screeching halt. The puncher had froze when the punchee dropped to the floor, screaming in pain, before kneeling beside him, blood gushing out of his face and causing his words to slur, and asked the guy if he was all right, then offered an arm as they both limped off in the direction of the nurse's office. It was clear that there was something about a guy's junk being threatened that united all men together in a protective brotherhood. "Well," he said slowly when he realized there was no imminent threat, "I'm gonna go grab a shower." "It's been a long day." Rose finally looked up and grinned. "Not so fast, Charlie," she sing-songed as she motioned for him to tilt his head upwards. As his eyes widened when he latched onto the greenery dangling overhead, Bella could practically see his thought process. That wasn't there earlier, because it wasn't. Nan had placed the mistletoe there, while he'd been preoccupied with checking out the living room. Rose had been gleefully stringing the stuff around the house, hoping to catch him unawares. But it was like he had a sixth sense for it, batting it down with whatever object was close at hand, before he dared to pass under the place it had once hung. He'd never admit it out loud. But she could tell it had become a game between the two of them. One that up until now he'd been winning. His stubbled cheeks flushed when Rose bounced over and placed a light kiss on one of them, then turned her own alabaster cheek and encouraged him to do the same. He was as skittish as a chicken pecking its feed on the ground, pulling away and clearing his throat loudly as the others chuckled. Emmett began bouncing giddily when she pulled away. My turn," he yelled, puckering his lips and advancing towards Charlie. Charlie's hand dropped to the butt of the gun, holstered to his hip, as he stepped out of the path of the hanging mistletoe. "Just try it, son," Emmett huffed. "Well, we clearly know who your favorite is," he sulked. "You just don't have the right parts," Rose said, puffing her ample chest out proudly. Bella chuckled as Charlie flushed beet red and darted his eyes around the room, looking at everything but Rose. She took pity on her poor father. "Go take your shower, Charlie. I'll fix you something to eat." He nodded, the color fading from his cheeks. "You kids staying for dinner?" Jasper shook his head, doing his best to look genuinely bummed that he had to refuse the offer. No, we're going to finish up some Christmas shopping in Port Angeles. But we'll be back later, Charlie smirked. Whose choice is it tonight? They had been doing a 12 days of movies thing for the last 3 days that would lead them right up to Christmas Eve, alternating their picks between the 5 of them. Last night's had been Emmett's choice, and they'd been forced to sit through Santa vs. Zombies, the Holiday Edition. Where the hell he had gotten his hands on such trash, he had no idea. Seriously, Santa's elves were envisioned as stripper ninjas. Bella wished she was making that up. She had not been the only person traumatized by the time it was over, and the decision was unanimous that Emmett's future choices had to be group approved. Mine, Bella said, grinning when she saw Charlie practically sigh in relief. A Christmas Story all the way. She'd been floored when she'd learned her vamps had never seen it. Charlie grimaced, and Bella had the feeling that he'd had more than a few Christmases, where he had nothing to watch, and had been forced to tune into the 24-hour broadcast of the movie that seemed to play every year. I'll take that over stripper elves any day, he decided. Stripper ninja elves, Emmett corrected. Let the slave ride begin, Jasper quoted ominously before snorting. Bella tapped him lightly with her elbow. I'm trying to rid myself of all memories of that movie, and you're certainly not helping. Jasper grinned. I saw Emmett's browser history. We got off lucky. Bella looked skeptical. Lucky? What could possibly be worse than that? Jasper leaned his lips in close to her ear. Depends. How comfortable would you be watching Christmas-themed porn in front of your father? He whispered. Emmett? Bella scolded, her voice heavy with disgust. Charlie looked between a scowling Bella and an innocent-looking Emmett. Okay, I definitely don't want to know. I'm gonna go take that shower now. You kids drive safe. He walked out of the living room, his exit followed by the sound of the creaking stairs. Bella followed her vamps as they made their way to the door, chuckling as they grabbed their jackets off the hooks in the entryway as they went. It was always amusing to watch them bundle up in the winter necessities, gloves, hats, scarves, knowing that they could have strutted around in the slightly above freezing temperatures, stark naked and not feel a thing. Bella knew better to say that out loud, though, because knowing Emmett, he'd totally take it as a dare. Jasper usually kept it simple with his leather jacket and a pair of matching gloves, while Rose accessorized her faux fur coat with a knitted scarf. Emmett seemed to get the most enjoyment out of playing dress-up, bundling himself in a puffy down jacket, mittens, and a bright green toque complete with ear flaps, tassels, and a fuzzy purple pom-pom dangling from the top of it. Bella couldn't decide what looked worse on his head, the bleached locks he'd sported on Halloween or the hat he was currently pulling on. Rose saw her looking at it and rolled her eyes. He insists on getting a new one every year. Last year's version had horns. Bella grinned. She had seen a hilarious monkey hat, complete with ears, down at a clothing store in Port Angeles, and made a note to pick it up when Rose and her went down on the weekend. You sure you don't want to come? Jasper asked as Bella trailed behind him out the door. Bella shook her head. She had finished most of her Christmas shopping last week, with the exception of a few stocking stuffers she planned to pick up. Nah, me and Rose are gonna head up again on Saturday. He nodded and bent his head to brush a kiss across her lips. See you later then. Text me when you're on your way back. I will, he replied over his shoulder as he walked down the stairs. Bella stood on the small porch, arms wrapped around her body for warmth as she watched Jasper's truck back out of the dooryard. She offered a small wave, which they all returned before going back into the house and closing the door behind her. She headed directly for the kitchen, throwing a plate of the lasagne that she had fixed earlier into the microwave and setting the timer. She had eaten before Charlie got home, so she decided she'd get a start on her wrapping before the others got back. Walking up the stairs, she headed for her bedroom, passing the bathroom door just as she heard the shower cut off. Dinner's in the microwave, she called out. Thanks, came Charlie's muffled reply. Entering her bedroom, she crossed over to her small closet after she closed her door behind her. Reaching in, she pulled out several plastic bags packed with unwrapped gifts, a large unopened roll of wrapping paper in a shiny gold color that reminded her of her vamp's eyes, self-adhesive tags, and a package of small clothing boxes. Carrying the load over to her bed, she dumped all of it on the bedspread and walked over to her small desk, grabbing a pair of scissors and some scotch tape from her top drawer. Need some help? Nan asked, suddenly appearing at the foot of the bed. Sure. You want to wrap your stuff? None, with the help of Bella, of course, had picked out a few items for everyone. They'd be addressed from Santa, but she knew that her vamps would know who they came from when they opened them, because they all related to their nicknames in some way. A pair of dangly star-shaped earrings for Rose, a set of dog tags with his name and nickname engraved for Emmett, and a thick leather wristband with a small silver replica of an old-fashioned sheriff's badge at the center of it for Jasper. That one had to be special ordered off the internet a few weeks ago, and had only arrived yesterday. As Nan nodded eagerly and took the bag she pointed out, Bella sorted out the gifts she had bought in piles. Emmett had been the easiest to buy for. She had gotten a few t-shirts with cheeky sayings. The one she was looking at now had, "I am currently unsupervised. IO, it freaks me out, too. But the possibilities are endless," emblazoned on the front in bright white letters, along with a video game she knew he had his eye on. For Rosie had gotten a set of silver friendship ankle bracelets with a small rose and swan shaped. She figured she had already done the bell thing with her necklace and charm bracelet pendant dangling from the center of the chain links. She felt a little nervous about this gift, concerned Rose would think it was a little silly, but she wanted to make sure Rose knew how much she appreciated her friendship. Pushing all those gifts aside, she reached for Jasper's first, pausing to caress her hand over it. It was a sketchbook, bound in aged leather, with his name embossed in gold at the bottom right corner. Ever since Rose had told her that Jasper was a talented artist, showing her some drawings that had been secreted away, but had given up the hobby years ago when things had started to get bad with her, she was determined to get him to start again. She had also got him a set of high-quality charcoal pencils to go with it, which, taken together with the book, equaled a hefty price tag. In fact, with all of her Vamp's gifts, this had proven to be her most expensive Christmas yet. But it didn't matter. They were more than worth it. Bella stuck her tongue out in concentration as her fingers flew over the keyboard on her touchscreen phone. Jasper had texted her 10 minutes ago to tell her that they were on their way to her house, and she wanted to make sure that... The phone buzzed in her hand. "Don't worry, I didn't forget your M&Ms. She grinned and deleted her half-typed message. She restarted when her phone chirruped again. "And your Swedish berries?" "You're my Swedish berry." She grinned as she sent the overly cheesy message, knowing Jasper would get a kick out of it. A few seconds later, she got another text, this time from Emmett. "I think I may have just threw up in my mouth a little." She frowned playfully as she sent her next message to Jasper. "Beat a deer and smack him for me." Bella chuckled as she got a second message from Emmett. "Row." "Mulaha, I have the power." "That's right, just get your little puppet to..." She frowned at Emmett's half-sent message, before her phone chirruped a second later, this time from Jasper. "Belle, this is the puppet. Emmett's phone has officially been confiscated for the rest of the trip." She laughed. "Love you, see you soon." Bella waited for his reply, returning her affections, before sliding her phone back into her hoodie pocket and picking up the box of popcorn she'd been fiddling with before he texted. She withdrew a single cellophane bag and tore the wrapping off before sticking it into the microwave. She closed the door but didn't set the timer just yet and turned to the nearest cupboard to grab a couple of bowls. "Are they on their way?" Charlie asked as he entered the kitchen and crossed over to the fridge. "They'll be here in about 10, she replied, reaching out for the fizzy pink lemonade he handed her. He popped the top off a bottle of root beer. The ever-consummate cop. It was the strongest thing he'd drunk in a house full of minors. If he only knew, and took a long pull of it. "How you doing, kid?" he asked suddenly. Bella frowned at the out-of-left-field question. "Fine," she said slowly. "Why do you ask?" He sat the bottle down on the counter behind him. "I know we haven't really talked about what happened with your mother." Bella chuckled uneasily. "It's all right, really. She may not sound as confident as she felt, but she did mean it." Renee had been gone by the time Bella had gotten back from her weekend with her vamps, apparently telling Charlie that she'd never step foot in Forks again, and though the hurt still lingered, she'd be lying if she wasn't glad to see her go. But with Jasper, Emmett, and Rose around, along with a promise to never leave her alone with her again if she should ever go back on her word, she didn't really have the time to brood on her thoughts, and before she knew it, the hurt from the visit had faded to little more than a mild sting in the background. "Is it?" he asked seriously. "Have you talked to her since?" She turned back and pressed the popcorn button on the microwave. "Long enough for her to tell me my gift was in the mail." Bella had sent her a card in return and a universal gift card as well. She knew it was impersonal, but after coming up empty-handed after searching the mall for 3 hours, she realized that she didn't really know her mother anymore and probably never had. His eyes were downcast, his shoulders slumped when she faced him again. "Was it always like that?" he said tightly. "Not always. Sure, the bad days happen more than the good, but Bella could remember a few times when things were, dare she say, pleasant between the two of them. After Nan had died, it seemed like Renee was seriously attempting to repair their relationship, taking Bella on outings or asking her about her day and actually listening. But within a few months, it was like the novelty had worn off and things went back to the way they were, only to be repeated when Nan's house burnt down. Bella finally knew, for certain, they'd never have a normal relationship when she found herself hoping for another tragedy just so that Renee would actually be a mother to her. I know our relationship wasn't much better, Bella, but if I had known, I would have done something. I know you would have. I just don't know if I would have accepted the help at the time. While Charlie hadn't exactly been a stranger, he had been less familiar to her than Renee, and although the, quote, lesser of two evils was inappropriate to the situation, at least in Charlie's case, she didn't know how to explain her decision to stay any better. Familiar versus unfamiliar, she supposed, and in most people's cases, they'd choose familiar and she was no different. She chuckled dryly to herself when she realized how closely it mirrored her own vamp situation in regards to the Cullens. Thanks for this, though, letting me move in with you. Thanks seemed like a poor substitute for what she really wanted to say. Whether he knew it or not, by refusing to move when his wife insisted and by continuing to live in Forks after they divorced, he had been inadvertently responsible for her even meeting her soulmate and the brother and sister she had never had. How could you even begin to thank someone for that? Especially when they had no idea that it even done anything. Anytime, kiddo, he shifted uncomfortably. I love ya, Bells, he said gruffly. Her eyes misted at the rarely spoken affection from him, and she felt her heart swell with love for not only him, but her vamps as well. Just as Charlie had been instrumental in meeting them in the first place, her vamps had helped her and her father bond in a way they hadn't been able to before. Love you too, Dad, she returned, and they shared a moment of companionable silence. It was soon broken by the beeping microwave. I'll get everything set up in the living room, he offered as he snatched up his discarded root beer and walked out. I always liked that man, Nan mused after he disappeared around the corner. I told your mother she made a mistake leaving him. Bella chuckled as she divided the bag of popcorn into two separate bowls. If you claim to like him as much as you say you do, why would you make him suffer like that? Touché! Bella heard the rumble of an engine as she drizzled a bit of melted butter over the popcorn that had been designated as Charlie's bowl. She made an ick face as she did it, practically hearing the cholesterol clogging up his arteries. But he insisted that even the extra buttery, as it proclaimed proudly on the front of the box, wasn't buttery enough. She juggled the two bowls in the crook of one arm and used her free hand to pick up her glass of lemonade. Another small bowl for her M&Ms balanced on top of that, as she made her way towards the living room. Charlie watched her with an amused tilt of his lips as she managed to get everything to the small coffee table in one piece with a proud ta-da exclamation. She arranged her own dishes within arm reach and passed the greasy bowl to Charlie, who was sprawled out in his recliner. She settled back into the couch just as Emmett stumbled through the door, sparing a moment to shed his winter clothes, and probably using a little vampire speed to do it, and leapt over the back of it, plopping down heavily beside Bella and causing the furniture to let out a loud creaky groan. Bella's eyes widened. When was Emmett going to learn that his vamp strength didn't come with an off button? Ease up on the furniture, Emmett, Charlie warned good-naturedly. It's been with me since I got this house. He took a sip of his soda. And no cracks about my age, he said, cutting off Emmett just as he opened his mouth to reply. Emmett pouted. Spoil sport. Her nostrils tingled with the scent of cinnamon a second before Jasper slid in beside her, dropping a kiss on her lips. Buy me something pretty? She asked coyly. Yeah, he said, sliding a package of peanut M&Ms from behind his back. She grinned. At least I'm easy to please, she replied. Rose took her place on the other side of Emmett, blowing a cheeky kiss at a flushed Charlie who stuffed a handful of popcorn in his mouth and looked away. Bella could just make out the barest hint of a grin on his face. As Bella tore open the top of the packet of M&Ms and poured out the chocolatey goodness, she was reminded of the text conversation they had earlier. Hey, who was driving when you sent those messages? She directed towards Jasper with a mock glare. We were parked in the driveway at the house. Me and Ain waited in the truck while Rose brought the bags in. Bella studied his face for a long moment before smirking. Liar. He grinned sheepishly. You're lucky I'm not on duty, Charlie drawled. That's $100 fine. His face was stern, before it cracked with a small smile. Just put it away next time, he advised. That's what... Rose slapped her hand over Emmett's mouth, saving them all from the inevitable. That's what she said, joke. "You're stifling my creativity, babe," he complained when Rose had deemed the moment had officially passed and removed her hand. She rolled her eyes. "I'm pretty sure tacking that lame joke on the end of everyone's sentences shows your lack of creativity," he scoffed. "Please, everyone loves those jokes," Bella snorted. "Are you kidding? They're a pain in the ass." "That's what she said." They all turned to stare at a completely straight-faced Charlie, who calmly took a sip of the root beer in his hand. Jasper and Emmett burst out laughing while Bella and Rose sighed in exasperation. "Thank you for encouraging him," Bella groaned. Charlie shrugged unapologetically, but there was a smug satisfaction in his face when he settled back into the chair. While waiting for the laughter to die out, Bella attempted to get comfortable on the couch. Now that the four of them were crammed on it, not an impossible task, but it certainly would have been easier if not for Emmett's large stature. You'd think it'd be uncomfortable, but for Bella, it just gave her an excuse to plaster herself to Jasper's side. "You mind?" she asked as she slung her legs over his. He curled his arm around her shoulders and pulled her closer. "Do I ever?" "Leave some space for Jesus," Charlie joked. Bella held up her hand. Her fingers pinched together to indicate half an inch. "That enough?" Charlie smirked. "Only if he sucks it in." Emmett scowled when Bella and Rose turned to glare at him. "Oh, come on. That line's practically asking for it." He pouted when their glares intensified. "Fine," Emmett rumbled, stretching his own arm behind Rose. "Got the movie in?" "All ready," Bella replied, stretching out across his and Rose's laps to grab the remote that had been on the stand next to the couch. "You could have asked," Rose said dryly. "You're right," Bella agreed, turning on the TV. "I could have." She stuck her tongue out at Rose and pressed the play button. She placed the remote down on the coffee table and darted her eyes between the popcorn and the candy as she tried to decide which one to snack on first. Candy won, and she settled back into Jasper as they quietly enjoyed the movie. Well, everyone but Emmett was quiet, that is. You know those people at the movie theater who you find yourself wondering why they spent $15 on a ticket. If they were just going to talk through the whole thing, the same ones that were a step up from the people that whipped out their cell phones and texted, the glare of their screen capable of being seen from space in the dark theater. Yeah, Emmett was one of those people. He kept up a running commentary throughout the entire thing, telling everyone he was, going to find a metal pole to lick as soon as this movie is over, just to see if it was possible for his tongue to get stuck. Bella hoped he was prepared for disappointment, because she imagined his venom would make that feat impossible. "You know the guy who played that kid starred in a few porn movies," she remarked offhandedly as she scooped up a handful of popcorn. "No kidding," Emmett volleyed back. Was he licking a pole in that too? Bella coughed violently, choking on her popcorn as Charlie sniggered loudly in the background. "I really should have known better," she muttered when she finally caught her breath, snatching her glass of lemonade out of an amused Jasper's hands and taking a huge gulp to wash away the kernels she could feel stuck in her throat. "I'll never be able to watch this movie without thinking that now," she groused, poking her bottom lip out. "Why must you destroy something that I love?" Emmett began humming, "You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch," and her pout quickly turned into a chuckle. "Let's just watch the rest of the movie," Rose suggested with a playful frown, and Emmett managed to stay quiet for the remainder, only breaking it to crack up at the sight of the poor boy in the bunny suit. "I'd kill to see Emmett in something like that," Bella thought gleefully. Turning her head slightly towards him as she pictured it in her head, she caught the same look on Rose's face. Their eyes met as they shared in the same thought, and Rose flashed her fingers to indicate how long it was going to take her to accomplish the task. Bella knew, come Christmas Eve, Emmett would be strutting down the stairs in a brand new pink bunny suit. It ended up being just as hilarious as she thought it would be, earning a place in the photo album Jasper had alluded to on Halloween right beside his Malibu Barbie costume. "Christmas, get everything you ask for, darlin'." Bella hummed against his chest, curling further into his embrace. "I didn't ask for anything. It's pointless, when I already have everything I could ever want." She placed a sleepy kiss on the fabric that covered his unbeating heart. Jasper grinned sappily. She was always saying things that made him fall more impossibly in love with her. Downstairs, he could hear the sounds of a video game over Emmett, and surprisingly enough, Charlie shouting. A new gaming system had been Emmett's gift to Charlie, and the two had begun setting it up as soon as the wrapping was cleared away. Rose, and Bella had pulled their funds together after Bella refused to let the two of them pay for it all, and secured him a cabin in a prime fishing area for 2 weeks. He wouldn't be able to technically take the trip until summer, but there had been an almost childlike glee on his face when he admitted he hadn't taken a vacation in almost 10 years. "You'll join me for a few days, of course," he asked, and although that hadn't been part of the plan, he and Emmett hadn't hesitated to agree. He was nervous about how it would go, though. It was easy to hide the fact that they didn't eat or sleep when they could simply go back to their own house. But in close quarters, oh well, that was months away, and he supposed he'd climb that hill when he got there. He could hear Rose humming happily to herself and wondered if she was still admiring the ankle bracelet Bella had given her. Rose had always been one of the least likely members of the family, aside from himself, to cry, or at least their version of crying. But Jasper had seen venom misting her eyes when she opened up the gift before leaping at Bella and hugging her tightly enough to make him nervous. He knew why she was so grateful, though. Bella might have told Rose that she was her first real friend, but what she didn't know was that she was Rose's first friend, too. Whenever they went to a new school, the few humans that would chance talking to them usually gravitated towards the more sociable Cullens, Alice and Edward, as broody as he was a hell lot more likely to talk to someone than he or Rose was, or occasionally Emmett. Bella had been the first human to reach out to Rose, or the first female, period. Esme had done the mother thing, but never really tried to be a friend to her, and Alice was frustrated by Rose because she refused to play along with her. Bella shifted against him with a sleepy moan, and he scooted forward until they were both lying back on her bed. She had told him that she always crashed after the excitement of opening gifts had passed, since she was a kid, and that he shouldn't be surprised if she nodded off on him. He grabbed the thick scrapbook filled with pictures of all of them over the last few months, Rosie's gift to Bella she'd been looking at before she fell asleep, and moved it to the stand beside him. He rubbed his thumb across her ring finger where his own gift to her rested, a silver promise ring. He had given her a few first editions of her favorite books downstairs, but had saved this gift for when they got to her bedroom, away from the prying eyes of her father. As much as he liked Charlie, he was sure no dad liked seeing their teenage daughter being given a ring by their boyfriend, especially considering the finger she had immediately slipped it on. It was appropriate that she had slid it on that finger when he'd given it to her, because as soon as she graduated, he intended to replace it with an engagement ring. With Charlie's blessing, of course. He already had a well-reputed jewelry designer working on it. Rose had helped him perfect the band he had in mind, comprised of linking infinity symbols, with a small heart-shaped emerald, Bella's favorite color, in the center. He thought the symbols were appropriate, because when he gave her that ring, he planned on not only asking her to be his wife, but for her to spend eternity with him. He looked down at her angelic face, brushing a hand across the apple of her cheek, and decided that even that wouldn't be long enough. New Year's Eve. Promise me you won't let me get anywhere near a karaoke machine. Jasper's grin turned into a playful leer as he watched Bella slip on a short, silvery dress. Rose strikes again, he thought blissfully as she turned and offered her creamy back, pointing at the zipper. I promise, darling, he replied as he zipped her up, brushing aside her vanilla fragranced hair in the process and placing a kiss on her neck. I won't talk to you for a week if you do, she warned, slipping her feet into a pair of matching heels, the same ones he'd watched her practice walking in for 3 days beforehand. He had planned on telling her she shouldn't feel like she had to wear them. But now that she had them on and seeing that they made her already amazing legs look insane, he found himself biting his tongue. Wonder if I can get her to keep them on later? He flashed her a toothy grin. You can trust me, Belle. She was crazy if she thought she could ignore him for a week anyways. He was right. She only lasted a day. Bella kicked at the cool hand and circled around her ankle. She could feel the metal charm of her bracelet slapping against her skin with each kick as she fought to release her foot from the grip it was held in. Let me alone, she grumbled groggily. Not gonna sleep the day away, are you? Her head peeked out from beneath the pillow it had been buried under as she glared at the man kneeling at the end of the bed. I'm not talking to you, remember? No, remind me again. Hey, I may have been drunk, but not so much that I don't remember a certain someone letting me near the karaoke machine after I specifically told them not to. You were tipsy more than anything? Tipsy shimpsy. It was still enough to lead to bad decision-making. And yet you still managed to go home with the best-looking guy at the bar? She propped herself up on her elbows and looked around. Oh, is Emmett here? She smirked victoriously as Jasper scowled. It's time to get up. Why? It's only, she checked her internal clock, noon. She may have still felt a little heavy-headed from last night's shenanigans, but she was certain it was working properly. It's 3 in the afternoon, darling. Or not. Where's your sympathy for the slightly hungover girl? She grumbled. And if you even think about telling me to look in the dictionary, I will. She paused. She couldn't exactly hit him without hurting herself even more in the process. Seriously consider thinking about hitting you. Well, I wouldn't want you to think about hitting me. Might hurt yourself. I hate you, she growled, flopping back down and pulling the covers over her head. Love you too, Puddin'. Besides, I might have something that will cheer you up. She shifted a corner of the blanket enough to peek an eye out and saw him jiggling his cell phone in his hand. She gasped loudly and groped at the bedstand beside her, wrapping her hand around the first object it came in contact with, a thick, hard-covered book that Jasper had been reading for the last few nights. So help me God, Whitlock. If you filmed me singing, I'll throw this book at your stupidly handsome face. She sat up in bed, wrapping the sheet tightly around her chest, and shifted the heavy tome threateningly in her hands. Stupidly handsome, he repeated with a large grin. Fishing for compliments, Jax. And here I thought such actions were beneath you. His grin melted into a wicked smirk. I only want you beneath me. She rolled her eyes. Ugh, what are you? Taking suave lessons from Emmett. He pouted. No, but speaking of Emmett, put the book down, Belle. I promise I didn't film you. Though I did think about it, he muttered as she turned to place the book back where she got it. What was that? She asked sharply. Nothing, he said quickly. Yeah, that's what I thought. She leaned back against the headboard and patted the space beside her. Jasper slid up the bed next to her and leaned in close enough so that she could see the small screen. The video was already queued up, and when she nodded, he hit play. She pretty much already knew what to expect. She may have been a little tipsy last night, but she clearly remembered laughing at Emmett's song choice. She wasn't the only one either. She could make out the muffled titters in the crowd as the opening chords of Umbrella struck up, under the blaring fluorescence that lit up the stage, which made Emmett glow like a freaking neon sign. She watched as he brought the microphone up to his lips with one hand and held the item he'd managed to acquire over his head with the other. Where the hell did he get the umbrella anyways? Damned if I know. His singing wasn't terrible, she'd definitely heard worse, but it wasn't very good either. He made up for any lack of talent with exuberant enthusiasm. She had to admire Emmett. Everything about him, not just his stature, embodied a go big or go home mentality. She had a feeling people could enjoy themselves a lot more if they lived their lives just like he did. The smile on his face as he danced around the small stage, microphone in one hand and umbrella in the other, not caring that he looked like a fool, gave proof to the fact that this was one happy guy. As he neared the end of the song, she leaned closer when she finally realized the chorus seemed a little off. Stop, play that again, and turn it up. Jasper grinned, backtracked a few seconds, and increased the volume before pressing play again. You can stand under my Bella, Alla. He wasn't trying to slur his words to make it sound like he was drunk like most of the people singing karaoke, including her, had been. So it was obvious he was deliberately leaving out his... Off-screen, she heard a male voice shout, "You're singing the wrong words, dumbass." She sighed loudly. I didn't notice that last night. Did he do that through the whole song? Jasper laughed. He snuck it in near the end. Which explains the song choice, and gets far too much pleasure out of doing that. I'm thinking about legally changing my name to something unpronounceable out of spite. Something with a lot of Q's and X's. Jasper pocketed his phone. He only does it because he knows it annoys you. Typical big brother behavior. She wouldn't change it for the world. Though I suppose you're partially responsible for him singing anyways. What did you bet again to get him to do that? That he could do a shot without gagging. You're gonna get into trouble one of these days, I imagine. First it's Halloween costumes. And drinks. Next he's running naked through Times Square. Jasper looked away with a guilty smile. No way, she gasped. Well, he wasn't completely naked. He was wearing a Speedo. I don't remember seeing that immortalized in the photo album. The one we have now is technically part 2. What happened to part 1? He shrugged. Alice happened, he said mysteriously. She crossed her arms over her chest. You gonna finish that story? Only if you're good. Me? She asked, poking at his shoulder. You're the one disobeying their mate's direct orders. Funny, I remember a certain brunette she-devil threatening me with a lack of access to her female parts for a month. If I didn't let her get on that stage. Exact quote, I believe. She blushed. I don't remember saying that, but it would probably make sense in Boo's addled brain to counteract a threat by making another one. Definitely never drinking again. She supposed it could have been worse. All drinking did was make her want to channel her inner rocker, instead of encouraging some sort of girls gone wild attitude and leading to her violating a few public decency laws. She was sure Jasper would absolutely love dealing with that version of Bella. When she looked back at him, he was regarding her through lowered lashes, with a look that would have melted any woman's heart in a 50-meter radius. "Still mad at me?" "As if I could stay mad at that stupidly handsome face of yours." He leaned in for a kiss, and she held her hand up to stop him. Casanova, not until I brush my teeth." She tugged at the sheet he was sitting on, encouraging him to lift up enough so she could wrap it around her naked body like a toga. She wanted to ask him why she was naked. She usually slept in one of his shirts, but vaguely remembered stripping down as soon as she walked through the bedroom door before passing out on the bed. She shuffled towards the bathroom and flicked on the light. She made a face as she caught her reflection in the mirror. "I look like a hot mess." Jasper leaned against the door jamb. "You're beautiful." "Beautiful?" She grinned, reaching for her toothbrush and applying toothpaste liberally to the bristles. "Fishing for compliments, Miss Swan." Her lips formed a smile around the plastic toothbrush in her mouth, and for the next 2 minutes the only sound in the quiet bathroom was the soft swish, swish noise. As she scrubbed at her teeth, she eyed his reflection in the mirror as she spat out the white foam. "What would you do if you were more like the movie vamps and couldn't see your reflection?" she asked, before tipping a small cup of mouthwash in her mouth. "Well, obviously I'd still be this pretty." She sputtered out a laugh, causing the minty liquid to dribble down her chin. She spit the remainers into the sink, and her scowl melted into a smirk as she turned to face him. My, aren't we full of ourselves today? Is that your New Year's resolution?" She adopted an overblown southern accent. "I admire myself more. 'Cause the people around me don't already do it enough." He looked insulted by her deliberately piss-poor impression. "I do not sound like that." "That's what you get for not giving me a serious answer." He shrugged. "Have you ever really seen me checking myself out in front of a mirror? Run a hand through my hair, put on whatever looks clean, and I'm good to go." "Guy," Bella muttered. "Last time you checked," he teased with a toothy grin before continuing. "Even Rose is pretty low maintenance when it comes to that stuff. Alice is probably the only one who'd be devastated. Not being able to see herself in the latest spring fashions would probably kill her." He paused thoughtfully, and Bella suspected it was the first time he'd ever been asked the question. "It'd be a little disturbing, I guess, not being able to see yourself. How would you even know you truly existed if you didn't have the tangible proof?" he questioned, almost to himself. And Bella felt guilty for putting the pensive look on his face. He shook it off and gave her a small smile. "Though we'd probably take that over sparkling in the sunlight any day." Bella would have to agree. Sometimes it was hard to take her vamps seriously when they were standing in the sunlight. They could be telling her that her clothes were on fire, and all she'd think was, "Ooh, pretty sparkles." And they were pretty. Don't get her wrong. They made all her vamps, especially Jasper, look like fallen angels. But sometimes to Bella, those sparkles resembled chains. Chains that kept them tethered to the creature of the night persona. They may have escaped the stigma of burning in the sun, but they would never truly belong under it, only enough to tease. Madden thought, in some ways, it was crueler than going up in flames, to be given yet denied something, all at the same time. She walked towards him and looped her arms around his waist. "I love you," she murmured, blinking up at him with a soft smile. The clouds behind his melted gold eyes disappeared completely as he returned her smile. "I love you too." He bent down and captured her lips. In a sweet kiss, which, now that her mouth was minty fresh, she was happy to return. He began walking backwards towards their bed, tugging at the sheet entwined around her body, and she was content to follow until the reminder that she was still human, with human needs, reared its ugly head. She planted her feet, bringing them both to a stop, and pulled away with a faint blush. "Nature calls," she explained at his slightly put-out look. She pushed him away and began to backtrack her steps. With a sudden burst of naughtiness, she dropped the sheet to pool around her feet. "Hold that for me, will you?" She giggled and darted into the bathroom, slamming the door loudly as he growled lowly. "Tease," she heard him rasp thickly. She snickered. "You better be naked when I come out," she called. "And no twisting my words either, you perv." His answering laugh was low and dirty, and it sent a pleasant shiver down her spine, causing her legs to wobble as she teetered across the expansive bathroom and took care of the human necessities. "Why do you even have toilets?" she remembers asking after they got that whole "you're a vampire" thing out of the way. "Why do we have a refrigerator?" Jasper had countered. "Simple. 'Cause it's the human thing to do." Still doesn't explain the toilet paper, she thought for the 100th time since she found the stash. If they really wanted to emulate humans, the proper way was to not have a single roll in the house when you needed it. Though the fact that she considered that the norm could probably be blamed on her scatterbrained mother and her forgot where the supermarket was again. Father, she could remember a few times when Nain had to procure TP from best not to ask locations. Bella always laughed when she pictured the look on her strongly suspected neighbors' faces when they walked into their own bathrooms and found the freshly changed toilet paper suspiciously missing. As she washed her hands after finishing up, her eyes shifted between the bathroom door and the shower. As eager as she was to get back to Jasper and sexy naked times, her mind reminded her she wanted to wash the scent of the bar and its patrons off her skin. She knew the smell of a lot of other people on her made Jasper uncomfortable, especially when they were of the sweaty, overly perfumed and boozed-soaked variety that was prevalent at the bar scene, and it was probably a good idea considering they were about to get up close and personal. Besides, she thought as she stepped under the tepid spray for a quick rinse, I also know it drives him wild when I use his body wash. She reached for the familiar black bottle and hurriedly scrubbed herself down, grateful she had taken the initiative to shave all the necessary parts before she went out last night, so she wouldn't have to waste precious minutes doing it now. She stepped out and patted herself partially dry with the nearest towel, leaving enough water on her skin to give it a tantalizing slickness. She reached for the doorknob as she ran her fingers through her hair, aiming for what she hoped was a sexy, messy look. Her breath hitched as she pulled open the door and was greeted with the sight of Jasper's lean frame stretched out on the forest green bed cover. Not a stitch on, just like she ordered. The curtains were open, and just enough sunlight peeked through the perpetually gray sky to cast him in an effulgent glow. I still can't believe he's all mine, she thought in awe as she traced her eyes over every inch of exposed skin. He propped his head up on one hand and inhaled deeply. His eyes went pitch black as he beckoned her closer with a crook of his finger and a heated smirk that promised all sorts of dark and delicious things. As if in a trance, Bella inched closer, gladly accepting her fate and knowing that she could kiss any potential plans she had for the rest of the day. Goodbye. Not that she cared. This is so much better anyways, was her last coherent thought as Jasper reached and pulled her down towards him. Did you make any New Year's resolutions? Bella's warm breath tickled across the cool expanse of his bare chest, her fingers lightly tracing one of the many scars that decorated it. He shivered with each brush of her fingertips as it soothed away old hurts and shame. She had been the only person that never reacted with fear or disgust when she witnessed him shirtless. Even Emmett and Rose had flinched the first time he'd shown them, and Alice had never hesitated to point out how hideous they were. For that reason, he'd been nervous to show Bella these ones, because they consisted of more than the bite marks that littered his arms and upper shoulders. Those had been the result of fear, anger, and survival instinct. But the ones on his chest had been done out of something much crueler than that. His maker, Maria, had loved punishing him for even the slightest indiscretion, some real, some imagined, in his earlier days, carving into his chest with a rare and, as far as Jasper knew, one-of-a-kind knife, whose steel had been mixed with copious amounts of her venom when it was forged. It was made specifically to be used on vampires. It could pierce their normally impenetrable skin, and when coated in the same type of substance it had been constructed with, easily scarred. Maria had usually settled for simply dragging the blade across the skin of his chest, carving nonsensical patterns and penetrating deeply enough for the foreign venom to enter. The burn that accompanied it making it feel like he was turning all over again, laughing as he squirmed in pain on the dirty floor. She had never gone for his face, though, not wanting to mess up such a cremoso rostro. She had eventually grown tired of using it on him when he stopped reacting to the pain, facing her with hateful indifference instead, and for a time she had left him alone altogether, no longer getting any enjoyment out of it. That was until she had attempted to cut his heart out one night in a fit of rage, after he had let Peter, a vampire he'd grown fond of, and his mate escape. Lucky for him, though he had not been so sure of his luck at the time, she had come to her senses halfway through the job, and it left him with a thick, jagged, silvery scar partially circling his heart. The torture device of choice would prove to be her downfall when the same vampires he had helped returned to convince him to make his own escape. Maria had been losing ground for years. Once a powerful force that was feared in all parts of the vampire world, she was growing more insane and unpredictable with each passing year, killing off scads of her army in the space of days and causing even more to flee, until only a few were left. Jasper had been one of them because he thought he didn't have anywhere else to go, and deep down he secretly hoped she'd finish him off, perhaps with the same knife she was so fond of. It turned out Maria would meet her end at the knife instead, as Jasper used it to sever her head from her body, along with the few others that were still loyal to her. Afterwards, he had been prepared to destroy the knife, or throw it into the deepest, darkest pit he could find. But he had ended up holding on to it instead. Even he couldn't say for sure why he did. To this day, it was locked in a safe that only he and one other person knew the location of. As much as he trusted Rose and Emmett, he knew that the less people that knew about such a weapon, the better. Only the real members of his family had known the truth behind the scars on his chest, though it had taken him decades to finally tell Emmett and Rose about it, while Alice and the other Cullens were under the impression it was caused by nothing more than a vampire's fingernails that had been dipped in venom. Even if they really looked nothing like claw marks, they were happy to believe it. He sometimes suspected that Carlisle and possibly Esme knew something, didn't quite add up, but were too afraid of the truth to ask. Not when the lie that the only thing that could hurt a vampire was another vampire was much less unsettling to believe. He had been reluctant to share the full truth with his mate, but when he gathered the courage to strip off his shirt in front of her, his belle had simply looked at them as calmly as she had his arms in the forest that day, and he had found the story behind them spilling out. She had cried, good Lord how she cried, before the emotion was swiftly replaced with a flaming fury, so powerful it had made his head spin. He literally had to hold her back from storming off to seek her own vengeance on Maria, and had only calmed down when he told her the only thing she'd find is her ashes. "I'll never let anyone hurt you again," she promised later that night, as she swirled her fingers around the brutal designs on his chest. And even though she was still a fragile human, he didn't doubt for a second that she'd protect him as fiercely as he would her, whether she needed to or not. "Resolutions?" he repeated, as the dark memories of his past faded into the background and he looked down at the smiling brightness of his future. Basking in the contentedness and love swirling in her emotions, he was reminded of the day, many, many years ago, as he watched Marie's burning corpse, and unknowing that the rising sun in the distance signaled the first day of the new year, made his very first resolution. It was the same one he had been making ever since. "Happy?" he said out loud. "I'm going to be happy." Bella propped her chin on his chest. "That's a pretty simple resolution. I'm a simple kind of man." She laughed. "That settles it. Next time it'll be your turn to sing. You're assuming I'll be good at it." She snorted. "Vampires are good at everything." He cocked an eyebrow. "Oh, really? Would you like me to show you the video of Emmett singing again?" "Point taken, but you have a voice made for singing. I just know it." "We'll see. How about you, darling? You make any resolutions?" She nodded, then laughed again. "I suppose mine's pretty simple, too. I think I'm going to start calling Charlie Dad for good from now on." She looked up guiltily. "Does it sound terrible to say that he sorta earned it?" "Not at all. Any man can be a father. It takes a special one to be a dad." "How very Hallmark." She yelped when he suddenly flipped her over and began tickling his fingers along her ribcage. "I'm trying to be the wise, sensitive boyfriend here." "Wise old man is more like it." She giggled and squirmed underneath him, trying to escape his persistent fingers. "Uncle, uncle," she shrieked in between fits of laughter. When the movement only encouraged the action, he took mercy on her, flopping on his side as she struggled to catch her breath before turning to face him. With her flushed cheeks, messy hair, and sparkling eyes, she had never been more beautiful. He had made the same resolution for 70 years, but for the first time since he made it, he knew it had finally come true, and that he'd never have to make it again. January 7th, Bella nibbled on the small slice of chocolate birthday cake that had been bought specifically for her benefit, and gazed bemusedly at the birthday boy and girl. "What?" Jasper questioned first, picking the small pieces of birthday confetti courtesy of Emmett out of his hair. "I'm just wondering how it feels to be 19. She took great pleasure in shifting the plate to her lap and making the accompanied quotation marks with her fingers when she said this, and still in high school. "Honestly," he said, finally shaking his head in frustration to dislodge the stubborn pieces. "It sucks." Rose and Emmett nodded their agreement. "Considering how well we do in school, there's been more than a few teachers who've raised an eyebrow at our age, especially since it's usually in conjunction with being held back a year, or as we all call it, Emmett's go to excuse." Emmett scooped up a handful of the sparkly confetti and tossed it in Jasper's general direction. He scowled when a few managed to land back on him. Bella chuckled and set her half-eaten cake aside. Here, let me. She rose from the chair she'd been sitting in and moved to the end of the couch, perching on the arm. He leaned towards her, allowing her to pick out the metallic flakes. So, I guess this will be the last time. A slow smile spread across his lips. Yeah, I guess it will. There, Bella exclaimed as she picked the last piece out. She leaned over and dropped them onto the coffee table before sliding down onto Jasper's lap. She fiddled with the chunky silver ring on his finger, her birthday gift to him, tracing a nail around the endless knot that was etched into the large round face of it. She had stumbled across the ring online, unfortunately a few days before Christmas, nowhere near enough time to order it, and immediately bought it because she felt that the descriptions suited her and Jasper's relationship perfectly, and when looked at from a certain angle, it looked like some of the loops formed the first letters to their names. She'd been worried at first that he didn't like it, because he looked at it for a long time with a funny little smile on his face. "Do you not like it?" she'd ask, wringing her hands together nervously. "It's okay if you don't." She wasn't so sure if she meant that, though. Not when she was subtlety trying to tell him that her life was forever entwined with his, and if he didn't like the ring, then maybe that meant he didn't like the thought of forever with her. "Calm down," chimed Nan, warned when she began working herself into a tizzy at the thought, and quickly found herself approaching hyperventilating territory. "I love it," he insisted, sliding it onto his middle finger, with that same funny little smile as she breathed a sigh of relief. He curled a ring-adorned finger under her chin and pressed a soft kiss to her lips. "You're the first person to ever buy me jewelry." He grinned. "Well, you and your Nan if this counts." He jiggled the wrist that was wearing the leather wristband he had gotten for Christmas. "Well, I promise to get you a set of earrings for your birthday next year," Emmett quipped. "Maybe a nice diamond choker to go with it. Diamonds are a girl's best friend, after all." Jasper flipped him off. "Say, that is a nice ring." Her nail finished its lap around the knot. "Why did you keep going to school anyways?" she asked, genuinely curious. That had been one of the most confusing things about the whole group. When they could have easily done anything, anywhere they wanted, and surely to God none of them wanted to stay in school for the rest of their lives. "We kind of felt obligated to," Rose admitted uncomfortably. Carlisle was very dedicated to playing human, and it was sort of an unspoken requirement for staying a part of the family. We had to play our roles faithfully. "But why high school? You were 18 when you returned, old enough to have technically graduated, and Jasper, you and Emmett were almost 20. "Yeah, but do we look it?" Jasper pointed out. Bella tilted her head as she studied their faces. To her, she could see the maturity, more specifically in the eyes, and suppose it wouldn't be as obvious to someone who didn't know what exactly they were looking at. Their spirits were old, but their looks were frozen in time forever. "I suppose not," she finally said. "Our venom can be largely blamed for that," Emmett said, rubbing his chin as if inspecting a close shave. "It takes a few years off." Carlisle and Esme were quite determined to keep us as their children, Esme more so to replace the child she lost when she was human. Edward and Alice usually had no problem playing the part, but we did. So occasionally we'd switch it up for college instead, Rose explained. "Yeah, she's seen the ridiculous amount of diplomas." "And we had our brief periods of rebellion," Emmett boasted. "Where we refused to go, period." Rosie's face grew dark, but in the end they always had their ways of wearing you down. It used to be tolerable in the beginning, as kind of a way to fill up the endless hours, but it started to wear on me after a while. There's only so many times you can go through a graduation and listen to the speeches about lives just beginning before you start to realize that you're stuck. All three of them had various emotions on their faces: anger, bitterness, frustration, and she saw Nan frowning in the background. "They really need to stop hating themselves," she said. "I agree," Bella replied out loud. Jasper's dark brows furrowed. "You agree to what?" Bella slid from his lap and began to pace the space between the couch and the coffee table. "You guys really don't give yourselves the credit you deserve, do you? I've seen you sometimes when you'll stop and stare as if lost in a memory, and you always look uneasy afterwards. I know parts of you are constantly kicking yourself for the stuff you endured, but you gotta stop." She looked at the three of them pointedly. "You made the best of a bad situation because you were afraid of the unknown." She held up her hand when it looked like Emmett was going to protest. "Don't deny it, I went through the same thing. I stayed with Renee for years after Nan's death, when I could have been staying with my dad, probably contentedly. But I didn't. My relationship with him was complicated at the time, and a part of me was scared it'd be worse with him than it was with Renee, and I imagine it was the same with you guys. Wasn't it? The three of them nodded hesitantly. I get that you feel you have to be tough because of what you are, but it's your skin that's impenetrable, not your feelings. I've heard you say it before. Change is a difficult thing for you guys, and there's no reason you should feel ashamed for sticking with the Cullens for as long as you had. I mean, look at it this way. In the end, it brought you three together, didn't it? And surely it wasn't all bad. Jasper tugged her back into his lap. It wasn't all bad, he agreed. I can remember some good times, Emmett said with a nod. Me too, Rose replied, the beginnings of a smile creeping on her face. And, Jasper said, cupping his cheek in her hand, their desires to emulate humans so much led us right to Forks High. He brushed his nose across hers, and eventually to you. So I suppose, in many ways, we can thank them. Emmett whipped out his cell phone. Should I send a mass text? Jasper snorted. Put your phone away, you tool. Right? He nodded as he slipped it back into his pocket. Thank you notes are so much more personal, perhaps with cat stationery. Jasper groaned. I'm starting to regret the whole thanking thing. He turned to face Bella. Do I really want to thank them for an eternity of that? He asked, pointing at Emmett. Hey, we both know I'm the light, he corrected himself, when Bella raised an eyebrow. Okay, maybe the second light of your dreary little life. Bella laughed, glad that the mood in the room had lightened. No more self-loathing anymore, okay? She ordered gently. Jasper flicked her nose. Well, I can't promise you that, Belle. We are tortured creatures of the night, after all. Rudy, you mean? She asked cheekily. He grimaced. Save that description for Edward. Emmett leapt to his feet and landed a hearty slap on Jasper's back, almost dislodging Bella in the process. Now that the serious stuff is out of the way, can I interest you in a post-birthday drink? He invited. Jasper nodded and helped Bella ease off his lap. Rose, I'll pass. I haven't forgotten how the last birthday drink went. I had to wash the clothes afterwards, remember? Emmett sighed. Good times. He walked over to the sliding glass door, before bowing magnanimously in Jasper's direction. After you, birthday boy. Emmett blew a kiss over his shoulder, and with a parting smile from Jasper, the two darted out the door. When is your actual birthday? Bella asked Rose, as she washed the dishes she had dirtied. Though she knew her and Jasper celebrated at the same time to solidify the twins' story, she wondered if it was actually the truth. What a hell of a coincidence that would be. I honestly don't remember, Rose replied casually, drying the plate Bella handed her. How does Jasper know his then? He researched, found some documents. Couldn't you have done the same? I could have, she agreed. But from the parts I did remember of my human life, I wasn't too eager to dig in any further than I had to. Not in the beginning, at least. In the beginning? You looked later? Yes, not too long after Jasper joined the family. He was trying to find his roots and encouraged me and Amin to do the same. Is that how Emmett knows his as well? Yes and no. The fact that his turning coincided so closely with his birthday made it one of the freshest and more detailed memories of his human life that he had. The documents Jasper managed to find simply confirmed it. And what about you? We found out that the place that housed all my significant records had burnt to the ground about 5 years after I was turned. She smiled slightly. When Jasper found out, he said I could share his. That's when the twin story was first born. So you didn't find anything? No family? I didn't really have a close relationship with my parents. I couldn't even tell you what their names were if you asked me now. All I remembered of my life before, other than what I told you, was that I was an only child. Jasper attempted to locate any relatives using my last name as a reference, but I made him stop. It would have been difficult to have that sort of tie to my human life. Bella finished washing the final dish and drained the sink. Does it work that way for everyone? Forgetting when you're turned? Rose placed the dish towel down and walked around the island to ease herself into a stool. It's different for everyone. I think it all depends on a number of things, like how violent the turnings are, and who's doing the changing, and whether they know you or not. Bella wrung out the wet cloth and joined her. How does that help? They could talk to you during the change, reminding you of your life and encouraging you to remember. I've run into a few vampires that remember their human lives clearly, and even some that remember nothing. More often than not, all vampires remember something, but usually it has to do with the days or sometimes weeks leading up to being turned. Those ones will be the freshest in their minds. That's why I only really remember the events that lead up to my own. They were on a constant replay in my head as I lay burning. She placed her hand on Bella's. That won't happen to you, though. We won't let you forget anything. Mia, Bella squeaked. She looked nervously around the room, even though she knew Nan wasn't in the house with them. She had disappeared a few minutes after the boys had left and was no doubt out in the woods with them right now, antagonizing them in some way. She liked seeing how long she could haunt them before they realized she was there. Just like she hadn't had this conversation with Jasper yet, although in theory it was pretty much set in stone, she hadn't broached the subject of her desire to be a vampire with Nan either. She wasn't sure if the promise she made to Nan to live applied to her being dead, technically as well. Rose frowned. Jasper hasn't talked about this with you yet, has he? Bella shook her head sadly. He had tiptoed around the subject once or twice, but hadn't really sat her down and had a frank conversation about it. Don't think that means he doesn't want to, because he does. Probably desperately. I was the same way when I came across Emmett. It's kind of instinctive when you meet your mates. The only difference was that he was on borrowed time. Jax is hesitant in your case because he has so many things to consider. She hesitated. Like Charlie, but it will happen if you want it to. Do you? I do, she admitted softly. Rose sighed, a melancholy smile on her lips. If this were a different time and you were a different person, I'd be trying to talk you out of it. Why? Rose's gaze turned inward. I always wanted to be a mother, you know. Her hand reached up to cradle the flat plane of her stomach. I would have been a good mother, I think. And as much as I love Emmett, a part of me aches that we'll never be able to experience that joy. I think that's really why I was so willing to play the part of Esme's child. Because I could understand what that loss felt like. I hurt knowing that you might feel that pain someday. Bella inhaled deeply. I used to picture my future when I was younger. Usually after Nan would reminisce about Gramps, imagining what my husband would look like, what kind of house we'd live in, what breed of dog we'd own, things like that. I always thought it was strange that I never used to envision children in that scenario. It probably has something to do with the dysfunctional relationship I had with my own mother, and that little niggle of fear that I might turn out to be like her. She turned her head away briefly before shifting back to meet Rose's gold eyes firmly. I'm not saying that I'll always feel that way, but I can say I will never regret my decision to spend the rest of my life with Jasper. Him, you, and Emmett are all I'll ever need, and for me, that's enough. She placed her hand on Rose's and gave it a small squeeze. Perhaps you're right, she chuckled. Again, now that you're here, it does feel as though our family is complete. She turned her palm upwards and returned the gentle squeeze. And maybe that is enough. Bella nodded and kept their fingers entwined, sharing a moment of companionable silence. Can I still get a dog, though? She asked after a few minutes. Rose groaned. Please don't let Emmett hear you say that. They both heard the thump of feet on the patio out back, followed by a booming voice crying, "Too late." Bella's cell phone rang loudly, with a melody that was definitely not her own, waking her quite unpleasantly out of a lovely dream involving her, Jasper, and melted M&Ms. Scrunching her eyes shut, she groped at her bedstand wildly, almost knocking off the small lamp that sat on it with her flailing hand. What? She snarled into the phone, when she finally found it and mashed her finger into the answer button hard enough to hurt. Good morning, sunshine. Seriously, Emmett. Seriously. You wake me up at... She blinked blearily at her alarm clock. 6 a.m. with Unchained Melody. It is the day of love, he stressed perkily. How'd you even change my ringtone? It had been perfectly fine when Jasper had called her last night before she went to bed. Snuck into your room while you were sleeping, he replied casually. She jerked up, fully awake now. You're not serious, are you? Wouldn't you like to know? He whispered ominously, following it with an over-exaggerated evil guy laugh. She heard the sound of a scuffle before Jasper's voice came on the line. Sorry about that, Belle. I should have realized something was up sooner when he skulked from the living room this morning. I did not skulk, Emmett insisted in the background. His protest was followed by a dull thunk. Quit hitting me, he whined. I should have kept the phone after I caught him making a call to the florist yesterday. Florist? Bella had never gotten flowers before. Not that she was particularly fond of them. Her black thumb had almost killed Nan's garden. But that didn't sound too bad. Very tame for an Emmett prank, in her opinion. That's what it was. Yeah, for 50 bouquets of roses to be delivered to you at the house and 50 for Charlie at the station. I stand corrected, she thought, with the barest tinge of exasperation. Dad would have skinned him alive if he'd done that, and I would have gladly held him down. She hated roses. They had been featured predominantly at Nan's funeral, despite Nan not even caring for the flower, at Renee's insistence, while her own timid suggestion of her actual favorite, sunflowers, was shot down. Who has sunflowers at a funeral? Renee had scoffed. Bella had had the last say, though, placing a single sunflower on Nan's coffin before it had been lowered into the ground. Now roses always reminded her of death. There's only one rose I like. Raw. I love you too, Bells, she heard Rose cue. She laughed. Do you make all your calls a family gathering? Just yours, it seems. I guess they don't want to miss anything. I could stay awake just to hear you breathing. Emmett crooned off-key in the background. Rose, will you get him out of here before I rip his lips off? Jasper growled impatiently. Come on, Casanova, came Rose's muffled reply. I'm feeling the sudden urge to take a shower. Am I sensing some Aerosmith hostility? Bella teased when the background noise had faded. Alice, vow renewals, he gritted out with obvious reluctance. Bella drawled, glad that Jasper wasn't around to feel the brief stab of hurt at the reminder of the history he shared with Alice. She decided to change the subject. Have you checked your phone yet? Why? Mine woke me up with that god-awful ghost song, so I wouldn't put it past Emmett to change your ringtone as well. Probably to that song. Jasper cursed softly. Not probably, definitely. My phone's up in our room, I should go check it. Any lingering jealousy disappeared when he referred to what was technically his room as their room, and was replaced with such a powerful rush of love that Bella couldn't resist the urge to give voice to it. I love you, Jasper, she breathed softly into the phone. I love you too, Belle, he replied with such reverence that she felt tears prickle at her eyes. Do you want me to give you a drive to school? He asked, his voice still soft as if afraid to shatter the moment they'd just shared. She smiled. I'd like that. See you in about an hour, then. Bella glanced at her alarm clock, watching as the glowing green digits crept another minute closer to 1:15. Normally she'd sleep in till a little after 7. School didn't officially begin until 8, and it was only a 15-minute drive away. But figured since she was already up, and pretty much wide awake, thanks him, that she might as well stay up. Besides, it'd give her a chance to have a real breakfast for a change, rather than a bowl of sugary cereal that would leave her hungry again in an hour. Sounds good, she agreed. They said their goodbyes, with another love you thrown in for good measure. Like Emmett had said, it was the day of love, and Bella sat her phone back on her stand. After changing the ringtone back to its original tone, of course, just as Nan appeared by her bedside. You wouldn't happen to know anything about my phone, would you? She accused. Why? Nan asked, batting her lashes innocently. Bella rolled her eyes, too. What would I know about cell phones? If you remember correctly, I could barely set the time on the VCR. So what? You just left a window cracked and turned your back while Emmett snuck around in my room and molested my phone. Creepy. Would I do that? Besides, I seem to vaguely recall someone complaining about it being stuffy in their room last night. Bella glanced over at her partially open window. That's the last time I leave my window open. You seem to be forgetting he has a key as well. Then I'm changing the locks and finding a witch to do a disinvite spell while I'm at it, she grumbled. Nan smirked. Wrong vampires. Won't know until I try, she replied airily as she stretched. Do you know a witch? Bella scowled. No. Case closed then. Shut up, she muttered, shuffling out of her room. Bella stumbled into the kitchen. Guess I wasn't as awake as I thought I was, she thought, yawning into the back of her hand. You're up early, her dad greeted. He was already in his uniform, stirring a spoonful of sugar into his coffee. Emmett, Bella explained simply, making her way towards the lower cabinet beside the stove. You might want to check your cell phone, she warned as she reached for 2 skillets. He removed said device from the case, clipped to his belt. Why? He asked, looking at it warily. Just do it, trust me. He relented and crossed over to the portable sitting on the kitchen counter as Bella sat the pans down on separate burners and flipped one knob to a medium setting. She crossed over to the fridge to grab the eggs and bacon and watched as he punched the number of his cell phone in. She snickered when, instead of a standard classic bell ringtone, the powerful chorus to I Will Always Love You, cranked to the highest possible volume setting, sliced through the air. He scowled as he punched the end button, effectively cutting off Whitney's soulful warbling. How the hell did he do that? This phone hardly leaves my sight. She shrugged. You probably don't want to know. He shook his head. No, I probably don't. He handed her his phone. Fix that for me. If that were to ring at the station, I'd never hear the end of it. A few press of the buttons, and his ringtone was back to normal. She grinned when he called it again to confirm before taking it back from her. Don't trust me? She asked, setting the eggs to the side as she unwrapped the bacon. He disconnected the call and slipped the cell phone back into his pocket. Emmett got his hands on it somehow, he said, narrowing his eyes at her suspiciously. Hey, don't look at me. Mine woke me up with Unchained Melody. Remember that movie we watched the other night, the one where the guy shot himself in the arm to look innocent? I think I'd be a lot more likely to shoot myself than willing program my phone to play that song, she joked, carefully laying a few strips of bacon in the pan. She looked up at her dad as it began to softly sizzle. You want some? Tempting, but I got some paperwork I gotta catch on, he said, almost sadly as he buttered his lazy man's breakfast, a single slice of toast. I'm sure Jerry will have something waiting at the station anyways. It's his turn to provide. Bella frowned, feeling an almost maternal concern well up in her. Coffee and donuts is hardly a good breakfast, she chided. He laughed. That is his go-to meal. I'm gonna have to tell Jerry's he's becoming predictable. He finished up the last bite of his toast and finished it up with the remainder of his coffee. I'll just make up for it by having a big lunch. He moved over to the sink and began rinsing his cup out. You got plans for tonight? Bella blushed lightly and shrugged. She told Jasper it was pointless to celebrate a day for love when she happily celebrated their love every day, but he probably had something planned anyways. Maybe I'll definitely be spending the night, though. You, she asked quickly, trying to get her dad's mind away from the implications of what Valentine's Day and staying at your boyfriend's house meant. She was pleasantly surprised when his cheeks flushed, and he coughed. Do you? She prodded when he remained silent. He nodded sharply. I have a date. Jasper had sworn up and down that he had sent it on woman on her dad ever so often, but because she had never witnessed anything to support it, she'd never brought it up. With who? Iris Benson. Bella immediately recognized the name on account of the fact that she volunteered part-time at the Forks High Library, and was also legally blind. The kids at school called her Ironic Iris because not only was she named after a part of the very eyes that didn't properly work, but she worked in a place with books she couldn't see. Bella had talked to her once or twice. She seemed to know the exact place of every single book in the library, and Iris, as she insisted on being called, had mentioned that she knew her father, but never alluded to anything more. How do you know her? There was a incident about 2 years ago that I responded to, and we've been friends ever since. She usually invites me for coffee every week or so, and it became something more recently. Why didn't you tell me? It's just sort of a casual thing right now. It'll only be our second real date. Bella was bemused. You're having your second date on Valentine's Day? Yes. Why? She turned her head down towards the stove as she flipped the bacon, using her hair to shield the smile on her face. No reason. He shifted uneasily. I wasn't trying to hide her from you. I know, Dad. When it's new, you tend to go with the flow. Hell, it had taken her a few weeks to introduce Jasper to him, and this was even before they were dating. So it's not like she could fault her dad for doing the same. Besides, he had gone years on end, not having to explain his personal business to anyone, and it was probably a tough mentality to break out of, but she wanted him to know she supported his choices 100%. When it gets more serious, you'll introduce me, right? Officially, I mean. Officially, he repeated, and then grinned sheepishly. That's right, I forgot that she works up at the school on occasion. So, you've met her? He asked, the faintest hint of hesitation in his voice, as if he was wary of her opinion. I have. She's really nice. He nodded. She's great, he agreed gruffly, before straightening up and casting an embarrassed look at the clock on the wall. I better get going. Text me before you go to bed so I know everything's okay, he ordered sternly. I will, Bella promised. Let me know how your date goes, she added, grinning mischievously. He smirked. You gonna let me know how yours goes? Bella felt her cheeks heat up with a blush. That's what I thought. He started to walk out of the kitchen, but paused and headed back towards the fridge, reaching on top for a small red box that Bella hadn't even noticed. Happy Valentine's Day, kid, he said with a small tilt of his lips as he passed her the heart-shaped candy box. Hazelnut and caramel ones, right? She grinned. Thanks, Dad, she said, wrapping her arms around him for a hug. She kept the contact brief, knowing that he still wasn't completely comfortable with displays of affection. That's why the gift he had given her, however small, along with the small squeeze of her shoulder as he pulled away, meant as much as it did. See you later, Bells. Bye. Good luck on your date, she called out, twisting back towards the stove and turning on the second burner. Bella smiled widely when the front door closed. She was really happy for her dad and hoped it worked out for him. Don't be following him, she warned Anne as she swirled around a small forkful of butter in the second pan. Don't you want me to make sure this woman is right for stash? Bella contemplated it as she cracked an egg. She didn't really know that much about Iris and was admittedly a little curious about her, but knew if the roles were reversed she'd want privacy herself. As long as he thinks she's right, that's all that matters. I was just teasing you, Chem. You know I have plans today. The second egg she was in the midst of tapping against the pan broke in her hand, sending pieces of the eggshell flying into her partial scrambled eggs. She cursed as she used a fork to scoop the bits out before turning back to Nan with a deep frown on her face. You're still going, but you've never tried going that far before. What if it hurts you? Nan laughed lightly. Nothing can hurt me, Cham. Just like nothing can keep me from him. I've been by his side for every single Valentine's Day, and not even distance is going to stop me. But... No, Bella, Nan said sternly. I'm afraid this is not open for discussion. The lips tightened into a thin line. Fine, she forced out. She turned back to the stove and finished up her breakfast, not even bothering to turn back when she felt the shift in the atmosphere around her. Be careful, she whispered to the empty kitchen. Bella swirled the wet dishcloth around on her empty plate, unaware that she had been standing there washing it for the last 10 minutes. As filling as the food that had once been on it had been, with the worry over Nan clouding her emotions, it had all tasted bland to her. Lost in her concern for Nan, she didn't hear the front door open, nor the heavy-booted steps towards the kitchen. "UTTL," she yelped, jumping a little when her throat was cleared loudly behind her. "Jas," she gasped out, clutching a hand over the quickened pace of her heartbeat. Despite the fact that it was racing a mile a minute, she was incredibly grateful for the distraction. She glared lightly at the amusement on his face, and was tempted to throw herself into his arms and wipe off the smirk that tilted his lips with her own. But the action was impeded by the fact that he had both of them behind his back. In lieu of a greeting, she raised a curious eyebrow, staring pointedly at his waist, where his arms disappeared. His lips fell into a playful frown. What? No, sweetheart. Happy Valentine's Day. Hi, sweetheart. Happy Valentine's Day, she deadpanned. She eased the jokey delivery by crossing the kitchen and raising herself up on her tiptoes to plant a quick kiss on his lips. Now, what's behind your back? With a flourish, he brought his arms to his front, and Bella let out a genuine laugh when she saw what he was holding. The worry over Nan momentarily forgotten. It was a fruit bouquet comprised of cantaloupe, honeydew, grapes, chocolate-dipped strawberries, and pineapples, cut into flower and heart shapes, all arranged artistically in a bright red vase. She made a gimme-gimme motion with her fingers, squealing lightly as the weight of the vase settled in her hands. Would you think I was a total dork if I told you I've always wanted one of these things, she said as she twisted the vase and admired it from every angle. Darlin', you can quote cheesy 80s movies word for word. You are a dork. She shuffled her feet guiltily. I didn't get you anything, she admitted softly. She had thought about it, eyeing cards down at the small gift shop in town, but had grown frustrated that none of the generic messages seemed right for him, for them, and what she felt. Even the I'll love you forever. Once felt trite when compared to the actuality of having forever with him. Knowing that some man or woman could buy this for their significant other only to break up with them or cheat on them the next month made the message feel tainted in a strange way. The feeling was proven further when some woman leaned over her and grabbed the same card she had been eyeing, winking conspiratorially and whispering, "Now, should I give this to my husband or my boyfriend?" As she cackled like the two of them shared some secret joke, Bella had calmly replaced her own copy of the card and walked out of the store, firmly convinced that only fake love needed a holiday. As she looked down at Jasper's gift, she felt a little ashamed at her cynical viewpoint. As sure as she might have been of her belief at the time, she wasn't so sure now. She placed the vase down on the kitchen table. I'm sorry, A single cool finger placed against her lips stopped whatever she was going to say. Do you love me? He asked solemnly. Yes, she gasped out. Of course I do. Then that's the only gift I'll ever need, he whispered, lacing his fingers through her hair and tilting her face up for a kiss. Cheeseball, she murmured affectionately against his lips, happily letting herself get lost for a few minutes in his spicy cinnamon taste. Emmon rose with you, she gasped out as she pulled away and distracted herself from the lust buzzing through her by carefully unwrapping the clear plastic that covered the fruit. He grinned. They were still in the shower when I left. Valentine's Day always makes them a little frisky. He said the word huskily, like he knew, and he probably did, damn empath, that it was doing the same thing to her. Bella laughed. You mean more than usual? She snapped her fingers suddenly in remembrance. That's right, it's their anniversary, isn't it? Jasper nodded. 77 years, he said, almost wistfully. That'll be us someday, Bella thought giddily. Will they even be coming to school today? Jasper leaned against the counter. They'll be there. Probably cut out a little early, though. They got a flight to catch. Where are they going? Would you believe Newfoundland? Bella snorted. I call BS. It's true, it's kind of a tradition they started about 10 years after they got married. Like the bear hunting? Exactly. They go on a honeycation. He made a face. And it's word, not mine, to a different place every year. They started with the states, and when they ran out of those, they switched to provinces. Newfoundland is the last one on their list. How long will they be gone? Just the weekend. Bella chuckled. It must be nice to just fly anywhere around the world at the drop of the hat. Even if that anywhere happened to be Newfoundland, one of these days she was going to have to take Jasper up on his offer to whisk her away somewhere exotic for the weekend. She finally got the fruit unwrapped and plucked one of the chocolate-covered strawberries from the bouquet. Never having tried one before, she eyed it hesitantly for a second, before popping it into her mouth. Her eyes closed as they savored the sweet flavor of chocolate and strawberry commingling on her tongue, letting out a little breathy moan of pleasure. I think I just found my new favorite dessert, she sighed, licking her lips to gather up every last hint of it before flashing Jasper a smile. His slightly glazed eyes were focused on her lips, apparently oblivious to a word she said. Was it? With a small, wicked grin, Bella grabbed another strawberry, dragging the delicious morsel across her lips. Want a taste? She teased huskily. For the most part, food had absolutely no taste to him, but he seemed to be able to get a hint flavor whenever he tasted it on her lips, always pulling back with a slightly odd look as if it drudged up a distant memory. He told her that during those brief moments, he felt like he was almost human again. She bit into the small fruit, allowing the juice to fully coat her lips, as a few drops snaked down her chin. Jasper stalked closer, his dark eyes focused intently on the red liquid that stained her pale skin. He slowly leaned his head in, bypassing her lips at first so he could drag his tongue up her chin and catch those stray drops. When he finally reached her mouth, he wasted no time in delving his tongue in, searching for every last hint of flavor. So that's what chocolate-covered strawberries taste like, he hummed thoughtfully. You still taste better, he purred, leaning in for another kiss. Bella turned her head away, unsure if she'd be able to survive another kiss like that without spontaneously combusting. Undeterred, Jasper began pressing kisses to her neck, and she could feel his lips curl up into a smug grin as she weakly attempted to push him away. Just as she was about to say, screw it, her half-lidded eyes landed on the wall clock and saw that they had spent the last 10 minutes kissing, time well wasted, she thought deliriously, which meant she would have to scramble if she wanted to get to school on time. Jasper had used her distraction as an attempt to creep his way towards her lips again, but she gathered her tattered resolve and put a little muscle behind the next push at his chest, which of course didn't move him an inch. Jasper, she whined, I have to get ready for school. You started it, he mumbled against her cheek, before pressing one final kiss to the flushed skin with a small sigh. Go, he ordered reluctantly, twirling her around and pushing her towards the stairs. Before I change my mind and decide to join you. She ran up the steps, cursing the clock every step of the way. 15 minutes later, Bella was pulling her damp hair up into loose bun as she settled into the passenger seat of Jasper's truck. Her time in the shower had cooled her ardor, and now the worry over Nan was back. She saw Jasper looking at her out of the corner of her eye, a concerned frown on his face. You okay, darling? He asked, turning the key in the ignition and letting the trunk idle in the driveway. Can't keep nothing from an empath. Can I? She chuckled weakly. I'm just worried about Nan, she sighed. Why is she... All right, Bella snickered again at the hesitancy in his voice. No doubt he felt a little strange asking about the well-being of, well, a ghost. She's fine, I think. I hope. She huffed and leaned back against the leather seat. She has something in common with Rose and Emmett. Today's her anniversary, too. Did you know that? She tilted her head towards Jasper and watched as he shook his own in the negative. She used to visit Gramps' grave every year on this day, and when I was old enough, I started to go with her. She never missed a single year, not even after she died. She's there now? All the way back in... He trailed off in surprise. Phoenix, Bella finished, nodding her head sharply. Whoa, has she ever gone that far before? Never. That's why I'm concerned. I know it can't technically hurt her, but at the same time, I don't. Even after 7 years, Nant and I are still playing this thing by ear in terms of her limitations and whatnot. She never knows what she can and can't do until she does it. Has she always had that devil-may-care attitude? Always. You should have seen me try and talk her out of bungee jumping. Did it work? Bella shook her head with a small smile. Nope, instead she managed to talk me into doing it with her. And she came out of that fine. Somehow she knew it wasn't a question, but answered it anyways. Yeah, he brushed his knuckle across her cheek. Then she'll be fine this time, he assured her. Bella flashed him a hesitant smile and turned to look out the window as he backed out of her drive. God, I hope you're right. Marie traced the letters that made out the name on the cool marble slab. At least she assumed it was still cool to the touch. It had been a very long time since she had been able to differentiate between temperature changes. Sometimes she's not even sure if she remembers what cold or hot feels like anymore. Her hand was a touch transparent, and through it she could just make out the tombstone beneath her palm, its color muted gray thanks to the silvery tint to her skin. Chime had been right. She had never attempted to travel such a lengthy distance before, and it had taken more energy than she thought to get here. She felt tired for the first time in 7 years, but not even the fear of fading away completely would keep her from her will's side. Not today. Happy anniversary, my love, she whispered tearfully. Her eyes dispassionately ran over the name engraved beside his, her own, laughing again at the delicious irony that they had both managed to die on Valentine's Day, 12 years apart. It had stopped bothering her a long time ago that just beneath her feet rested her remains. They had shared so many life-changing events on this day, first date, marriage proposal, a year later, the birth of their son, that it was fitting that now they shared their death. He truly was her everything, her love. She brushed aside a vine that had been inching its way up the black marble, frustrated that she was unable to maintain the upkeep like she'd done when she was alive. I have no flowers for you today, love, she admitted sadly. Chime had usually been the one to provide those. Catching the sight of a small patch of wildflowers a few feet away, Marie scanned the cemetery as she approached them and, deeming it empty, scooped up a handful of the small but pretty flowers. These kinds had always been Will's favorite anyways. The ones grown by Mother Nature herself, with no outside interference. Look at the beautiful things she creates, he'd exclaim whenever he saw them. He'd always wink at her with his dark brown eyes so like Chime's after he said it. And even after their many years together, she never hesitated to blush at the thinly veiled compliment. I hope Mother Nature doesn't mind, she whispered as she looped one of the longer stems around the rest and made a loose knot, forming a passable bouquet. As she leaned the flowers against the tombstone, she grinned at the thought that if her Will was here, he'd be scolding her for picking them. Flowers are meant to be enjoyed by everyone. Sunshine, and how can they do that if you pick them? Tears prickled her eyes as the memory of the gentle chastisement echoed through her mind. I miss you so much, love, she murmured. She stretched her willowy frame down on the dew-covered grass, propping her head up on the marble base to the left of the flowers she had just sat down. The upside of not having a corporal form was that she no longer felt the unforgiving stone pressing painfully on the back of her head, nor did the dewy grass soak through her clothes. As morbid as this act may seem, she had gotten her fair share of stares from her fellow mourners when she had been alive, not to mention a talk from a very uncomfortable caregiver. It always helped her feel closer to her Will. The only thing that separated them now was 6 feet of dirt. A part of her wished she could phase through the solid mass as easily as she did a door and simply curl herself around him one more time. She dug her hand into the moist ground beneath her and pretended it was Will's work-lined hand she was holding. When she pulled it away, her pale hand, thankfully no longer translucent, was still pristine, absent of even the slightest trace of dirt, and once again, she felt cheated that she could touch, but never truly feel. It's getting harder, she sighed, resting her hands lightly on her stomach. Jasper has so many of your wonderful qualities, and Bella reminds me of me at that age that I feel like I'm witnessing our courting all over again. She chuckled. Aside from the vampire thing, of course, she's truly blossomed this last year, and I don't think she needs me anymore. Everyday Chime was depending on her less and less, whether she realized it or not, and rather than letting it sadden her, she felt the barest trickle of peace instead. 20 years without the man she had often called her soulmate was starting to wear on her spirit, and every year that passed, she could feel it calling out for its missing half. She knew it was almost time to answer that call. She fiddled with a blade of grass, twirling it around her finger. But not quite yet, is it? I sense something big is coming, love. I'm not sure when, but it's going to happen soon. She made a fist and pounded the ground beside her, then ran her fingers through the grass apologetically. I don't mean to take my anger out on you, love, but getting the sense that something bad is coming is not a good feeling. Not when I want to fight whatever it is, Will. Desperately. But I can't, because it needs to happen, doesn't it? I just don't know if she's ready for what's to come. A light breeze picked up, and she felt it on her face, almost like a caress, as she was immediately surrounded by the sweet scent of butterscotch toffee, her Will's scent, and she felt her worries melt away to become a distant hum in the background. She had never doubted it for a single second that it was her love guiding her and helping her protect the granddaughter that he had never met. It was his voice she heard whispering in her ear when she took her final rest, telling her that, as much as he needed her, Chang needed her more. She had listened and trusted his guidance then, and she would trust it now. All right, love, I trust you. As she closed her eyes and rested her head back against the headstone, she swore she heard her Will whisper, "See you soon, sunshine." Emmett was bouncing beside his car as Jasper pulled in beside him. His hands, like Jasper's had been early, were concealed behind his back. Bella stared at him from the window, not exactly as eager to find out what he was hiding as she had been Jasper. The last time Emmett had been in this position, he'd been concealing a super soaker. She cranked the window down a smidge. "Is he unarmed?" she called out to Rose, who was standing behind him. Rose nodded as she crossed her fingers over her heart. "You realize the cross my heart motion makes me even more suspicious," she grumbled as she opened the door and slid from the truck. "Always assuming the worst of me, Bells," he pouted. "And on a day like today, I'm hurt." He brought his arm around slowly, and Bella's eyes softened at the sight of what he held. She whispered through the lump in her throat when he produced 2 sunflowers. She remembered mentioning casually how much the flower had meant to her, and then a long time ago, and didn't realize Emmett, who'd been enthralled in a video game at the time, had been paying attention. "One for you and one for your Nan." He shuffled shyly on his feet as he looked around. "Is she here?" She shook her head. She had some things to do today. He nodded but didn't question it, like it was perfectly normal for Nan to have plans. "Will you make sure she gets it then?" "Of course." She'd buy a bottle of water from the vending machine and put them in her locker. "I suppose you won't be here to do it yourself. Lufanil, I hear? No offense, but what the heck are you going to do there?" The 4 of them starting to make their way towards the school entrance. "We're not exactly going there to sightsee," Emmett said, wiggling his eyebrows suggestively. Bella groaned and turned her attention back to the bright yellow and brown blossoms in her hand. She should have guessed that their trips were not so much of the how many places can we visit variety, but more of the how many places can we have sex in kind. She smiled at Jasper as he held the door open, only to come to a sudden halt. The second she stepped inside, Bella blinked as her eyes were assaulted with a splash of pink and red decorations, immediately overpowering the pleasant yellow of the flowers in her hand. "What are we in elementary school?" she scoffed as she eyed the Valentine's display that had been set up on a bulletin board beside the entrance. A quick glance down the nearest hallway revealed pink and white heart streamers decorating the ceiling. "It looks like Alice threw up in here," Rose agreed, her porcelain features scrunched in disgust. Instead of throwing his own insult into the mix, Emmett separated himself from the group and began jogging down the hall at a human pace. "I'll catch up with you later," he called over his shoulder. "Why is he in such a hurry?" Bella wondered out loud. Rose rolled her eyes. "He wants to put Valentine's Day cards in everyone's desks before the bell rings." "He still gives out cards?" "Oh wait, this is Emmett. We're talking about." "Of course he does." "So, Scooby-Doo or My Little Pony? I think it's zombie-themed this year." Jasper looked at Rose for confirmation. "They make zombie cards?" The question was answered 10 minutes later when she was pulling out a palm-sized card depicting a zombie munching on a corpse and declaring, in bloody red letters, "I love you to pieces." Hers appeared to be the more tamer one, judging by the varying degrees of disgust on the female faces, humor on the males, of course. Their homeroom teacher was tapping her own small card against her desk. "See me after school, Mr. McCarty." Emmett pumped his fist. "Detention worthy?" "Yes," he cheered. Bella chuckled wryly. Poor Rose. her sweetie being forced to stay after school on this day of all days. She noticed Rose making the no sex for you hand gesture out of the corner of her eye. Well, there goes his honeycation, Bella thought with a smirk. She hoped, for Emmett's sake, a later flight was available. Bella stretched out on the couch and grinned as she thought about the exasperated look on Rose's face when school got out. She and Jasper had run across Rose, tapping her foot impatiently outside of the room where Emmett was currently serving his detention, and although Bella had encouraged her to come back to the house with them, she had just waved them away dismissively and told them to have a good time. Which means that Jasper does have something planned. She wondered what it was. Jasper had disappeared the second they walked through the door, completely bypassing the kitchen where she assumed he was heading and going upstairs instead. When she tried to follow him, he had stopped her and told her to wait in the living room instead. She sat up when she heard his footsteps coming down the stairs and frowned bemusedly when she saw the picnic basket he was holding in his hand. "He acts as sweet as your grand romantic gesture was the first time. Isn't it a tad cold for a picnic?" This coming from the girl who was eating outside the first time I saw her. "Am I never going to live that down?" she muttered. He stopped in the middle of the living room and beckoned her to come closer. Confused, she stood and began walking towards him. As she drew nearer, the basket rattled in his loose grip and she came to a dead stop, flinching away from it. "What is it?" He grinned widely. "Why don't you find out? It won't bite, or at least I don't think it will." She hesitantly extended a hand towards the hinged lid, but the surprise inside apparently grew impatient, poking its head up and yipping as it gazed at Bella with warm honey eyes. "A puppy!" Bella squealed, reaching her hands in the crack and removing the small bundle of ebony fur, a green ribbon tied around its neck. "You got me a puppy!" she exclaimed again, giggling as its rough pink tongue began licking her face enthusiastically. "Emmett was the one who really insisted on it," Jasper said, setting the basket down by his feet, "and I knew if I didn't do it, he'd come home with some huge, slobbering beast." He scratched the pup under its chin. "Rose and I picked her out. We knew as soon as we saw her, she was special." Bella grinned as the sex of the dog was revealed, holding it up until their noses were touching. "It has your eyes." Her heart melted as the pup held up a little paw and rested it on her cheek. Jasper reached out and smoothed a hand over the pup's head. "She was the only one in the batch with yellow gold eyes, so we knew she was the one." "Why isn't it afraid of you?" Bella asked as the pup swatted playfully at Jasper's tickling hand. "I told you it was special. Pets are usually a no-go for vampires, but to be honest, it can really go either way with dogs, depending on their temperament. The more aggressive breeds instinctively consider us a threat and won't hesitate to attack us or run away in fear. But the gentler sort, like golden retrievers or a lab like this little critter, are more tolerant to our presence. They're still wary, definitely, but it helps if you get them when they're young so they can get used to us. We have a casual acquaintance who breeds dogs to be vampire tolerant." "A vampire dog breeder?" Bella asked, amused. "Now I've heard everything." He shrugged. "Not all vampires are as progressive as the Cullens are. More than a fair share shun any and all human contact, but that doesn't mean they don't need some sort of companionship. Dogs make the most sense, I suppose." "What about cats?" He snorted. "Nope. Cats absolutely loathe us. I suppose that makes sense. They don't like being around Annan either. I'm so glad Dad doesn't have one. It'd be hard to explain why its hair was constantly on end, as it hissed at nothing." "How do you think the dog will react?" "Hard to say. Some cultures believe that cats can see the specter of death, which might explain why they react to us the way they do. They see us walking around like regular people, but they sense death on us. Those conflicting messages probably lead to a lot of hostility. But I think dogs are too busy with the living to be concerned with the dead. So," he continued, his tone lightened to steer away from the heavy topic of conversation. "What are you going to name her?" Bella petted her fur thoughtfully. She was a little tempted to name her Vamp because of her eye color, but really didn't look forward to stumbling her way through an explanation lie, if anyone, namely her dad, asked for the origin of it. She looked down at the soft fur sifting through her fingers. It really was the most gorgeous shade of black ever. She began muttering softly to herself, black hearts, jet black." She grinned and started humming "Everyday People" under her breath. "Jet," she decided out loud, double tip. Jasper smirked, no doubt flashing back to New Year's Eve and the last and hopefully final time she had found herself on the other side of a microphone, entertaining the crowd with her best drunken attempt at "Do you want to touch me?" while shooting over exaggerated winks in his direction. It turns out that, while he might have had qualms about filming her on New Year's, Rose did not. Her performance was now burned on a DVD and hidden somewhere to be used as blackmail sometime in the future. "I'll find that video eventually," she warned before her lips fell into a pout. "Isn't it your duty as a mate to seek and destroy any embarrassing and potentially life-ruining footage there might be of me? Why, is there a homemade porno of you out there I should be aware of? One night in..." She gasped in indignation and kicked him in the shin, harder than she had initially intended. "Hold Jet for me," she said tightly, as she passed the pup to a visibly concerned Jasper. The second Jet was out of her arms. Bella bent her right leg at the knee and grabbed at her sock-clad foot. "Son of a whore!" she shrieked, bouncing around the room on one leg. Charlie would be swiftly introduced to Jet by having the pup shoved into his face by a panicked Jasper who only managed to stammer out the words, "Hospital, toes," as Bella cursed at him through the partially open window of his truck, pausing in her tirade only long enough to assure her dad that she was fine. Instead of dining in an intimate restaurant in Port Angeles, Jasper's second surprise, the rest of their Valentine's Day was spent in the ER, where Bella was fitted with a splint for 2 broken toes. Jasper would spend the next 2 weeks apologizing profusely. Emmett, of course, found the whole thing hysterical, cheekily calling her Stubbs as she hobbled her way around. He finally stopped when she glared at his shin, threateningly, and told him she wouldn't hesitate to break the other toes. "Major Whitlock." Jasper flopped back down on the couch in his study, raising one hand to pinch the bridge of his nose in thinly veiled annoyance. It's not like he considered him the harbinger of doom or anything. But things had been going a little too smoothly these last few months, and his instincts were shouting that something bad was around the corner. "Guess I'm right," he thought wryly, as he shifted his cell phone to his other ear. "Peter, something tells me you're not calling with good news." "Whoa, who's supposed to be the all-knowing one here? Alice?" He smirked, as he heard the low growl on the other end. Peter hated being compared to her. "Asshole," he hissed. "When did you get back in the States anyways?" Every few years, he and Shark would get bored of staying in one place and pick up and travel around the world. Usually they'd be gone for months at a time. He'd always been jealous of their spontaneity, something he had never been able to have when living with the Cullens. It wasn't exactly easy to just disappear for a while when you were supposed to be a teenager still in high school, raise too many questions, or so they had said. Peter sighed disgustedly. 2 days ago, we should have been back earlier, but Char insisted on spending a month in England. She kept babbling about finding her own personal spike. Before that, it was freaking Sweden. Jasper choked back a laugh, but Peter still heard it anyways. "Don't laugh," he whined. "Do you have any idea what it's like for a trip to turn into a sojourn for a bunch of fictional, he stressed, characters? Damn that woman for giving her those boxed DVD sets for Christmas a few years ago. Do me a favor and kick Rosie's ass for me the next time you see her," he muttered bitterly. "No, I don't know what that's like, but I have been dragged to Paris for Fashion Week about a dozen times, so I'm thinking you got off easy. Clearly we'll have to agree to disagree. Char ever force you to wear a pink silk shirt at any point during this trip? How about lavender?" Silence from the other end. "Then I rest my case. Why are you calling anyways?" he asked, trying to steer the conversation back on track. "You been keeping up with the news lately?" Peter's voice was all business now, the humor gone as he fell back into the second lieutenant role he'd earned during the Southern Wars. "Not really. Why?" "Something big is going down in Seattle." Jasper was equally unnerved and annoyed. As good as Peter was at providing intel, he usually took the long road when it came to sharing it. Sometimes he could easily visualize Peter holding a 6-shooter and aiming it at some poor sap's feet as he yelled, "Dance, puppet, dance. Something, you know I hate that vague bullshit, Peter." "Fine." Jasper could practically hear Peter rolling his eyes. Missing people, a lot of them, along with a handful of suspicious deaths to boot. Damn, that sounded familiar. A rash of sudden disappearances, more people dying than usual. It wasn't hard to connect the pieces. It's an army, isn't it? Maria had had a similar modus operandi when it came to building her own, but considering she had been dead for a very long time, there was only one other vampire that sprung to mind, conveniently another crazy female. "That redhead," he spat. "I should have went after that bitch when I had the chance." "Don't beat yourself up about it. The mating bond wouldn't have allowed it anyways. It was too fresh. It only would have hurt you both. Why doesn't it surprise me that you know about that too? Wouldn't have to do that if somebody called once in a while. Going over it in his head, Jasper was stunned to realize that the last time he had talked to Peter and Cher was almost a year ago. His eyes slammed shut as guilt spread through him. One of the first things Alice had done when she came into his life was encourage him to sever ties with the two vampires whose habits conflicted with his new way of life, concerned he would relapse if he didn't. In his desperation to escape his demons, he had agreed, albeit reluctantly, sparing them only a brief letter explaining his decision before cutting off contact with them for nearly 4 decades. When he began pulling away from Alice in the early 90s and reclaiming his freedom, one of the first things he'd done was reach out to Peter and Char and try to fix the relationship he'd fractured. It had taken almost 10 years and 5 new permanent scars before they had gotten to a good place again. No, Jasper thought. A better place, and he had promised that he'd never put that kind of distance between them ever again. And now, no matter how unintentional, he had broken that promise. Shit. Sorry. The school. You were bonding. Besides, Emmett filled me in on all the juicy tidbits anyways. His lips twisted. He should have figured. That gossipy bitch. He chuckled when Emmett yelled, "You know me," from somewhere in the house. So everything? Jasper prodded. Knowing Emmett wasn't exactly the type to leave out any details. "Yeah, gotta say that's one interesting girl you've snagged," Peter replied slyly. Jasper grinned. "You have no idea." "Oh, I'm sure I'll be finding out very soon." "You're coming?" "Does that really surprise you?" "No, it didn't. We'll be there before you can say, Peter is a million times more kick-ass than I'll ever be." Jasper snorted. "That will never cross my lips." "That what she said," Peter snarked before abruptly hanging up. Jasper sighed loudly. Damn Emmett for introducing him to that joke. He pressed the end button on his cell phone and tapped the small silver device gently against his forehead as his mind immediately went into battle mode. Just the thought of someone coming after his mate had the major side of him scrabbling closer to the surface, white-hot fury warming the venom running through his veins. He looked up when Bella entered the study, her faithful companion loping at her heels. She must have seen the frustration and lingering annoyance on his face, because her emotions grew worried. "Is everything all right?" she asked, as she scooped Jet up off the floor after the pup's second unsuccessful attempt to climb up on the couch and plopped her on Jasper's chest. She took a seat at the other end of the couch and lifted his head up to rest on her knees. "Yeah," Jasper sighed, feeling the major recede a bit as Jet snuffled her nose in his face and his mate ran her fingers through his hair. "But it's best if you start preparing yourself." "What for?" He grinned up at her. "Company's coming." Jasper could barely believe it was almost April. Where has the time gone? He wondered absently, as he ran a hand through Bella's silky locks and eyed the budding trees on the outer edge of the property. For a vampire, time usually moved at a snail's pace, where every single minute was spent staring at the clock and watching the time slowly tick by like some cruel reminder of the adage, "A watched pot never boils." But here it was a few months shy of being a year and a half since Bella stumbled into his life, and he couldn't even remember the last time he'd even looked at a clock. He didn't know if he'd ever be able to thank her for encouraging him to stop simply existing and start truly living. He smiled slightly when Bella leaned over his lap to switch the song on the iPod she had docked to a small set of speakers, the promise ring on her finger flashing as it caught the sun. It reminded him of the other ring he had stashed away. He looked forward to having the rest of their lives to show her how grateful he was. A few hours earlier, his phone had dinged with a text informing him that Peter and Shurak were on their way, and the 4 of them decided to lounge around on the patio out back and take advantage of the rare nice day that was finally freeing itself of the lingering chill of a long winter and teasing them with the hints of pleasant spring. Here in the privacy of their own backyard, they didn't have to worry about the effect the sun had on their skin. "Think I'll freckle?" Emmett had taken a break from rolling around in the yard with Jet and was now studying his sparkling hand as he held it up in the air. "I'm sure you'll be a bronzed beefcake in no time," Bella commented lazily as she leaned back further into Jasper's embrace. "Ever think of a spray tan?" she suggested jokingly. He watched as she suspiciously eyed a snickering Rose and Emmett. "What's so funny?" Jasper smirked. "Alice tried one once," he explained simply. Bella twisted in his lap. "Oh no, you can't just say Alice tried one once and leave it at that. I demand details." A book that had been lying on the small glass table beside them suddenly jerked into the air and smacked him across the head. "And Nan agrees too," she continued smugly. Jasper huffed out an exaggerated sigh. "Well, not only did it turn her bright orange, we're talking neon," Emmett cut in. "But the color refused to bond to her skin. She ended up ruining a pure white Corinthian leather sofa and a $1,500 dress." Bella cracked up. "Oh my God, did you get a picture?" "We did have one, yes," Jasper replied. "Wait, is this the reason behind the photo album 2.0? You know," she poked him in the chest, "the story you never told me?" "Yeah, instead of burning that single picture, she burnt the whole album out of spite." Bella's nose wrinkled. How utterly charming she was. Jasper thumped his head back against the patio lounge chair, a little embarrassed for how long he'd put up with Alice's childish behavior. There was only so far the blinded by love excuse would get you. He could sense that Bella was confused about what exactly he saw in her, and the truth was, he wasn't sure if he knew the answer to that either. An attempt at an explanation, for her benefit as much as his, was on the tip of his tongue, but his senses were suddenly on high alert as he registered the scent and sound of two approaching vampires. He saw Emmett and Rose straighten up in awareness, and even Jet, who had been sloppily lapping up water from the dish bowl that Bella had set out for her, wandered over to the railings that surrounded the porch and squeezed her head between two, letting out a quick succession of high-pitched barks. "What is it?" Bella asked worriedly, jumping off his lap and rushing to Jet's side as she began to whine with the realization that, while she may have been able to get her head through the railings, she wasn't having the same luck getting it out. "Silly furball," she muttered affectionately after she managed to gently maneuver Jet's head out and cradled her in her arms as she stood. The pup had calmed, falling surprisingly still and silent, but sharp golden eyes still stared in the direction that Jasper knew Peter and Char were approaching. Unsure of exactly how Jet would react to two human drinkers, the vampire dog breeder they had gotten her from assured them that there usually wasn't a difference in temperament, but as a vegetarian himself, couldn't guarantee it. 100% he sent her a dose of calm just in case, as he approached his apprehensive mate. "It's okay," Jasper assured her softly, wrapping an arm around her waist. "It's just Peter and Char." "They're here," Emmett added with a grin as the four of them leaned up against the railing and waited for their guests. Bella tamped down on the nerves that threatened to overwhelm her as the echoes of breaking brush grew closer. She wasn't scared of them, despite the fact that they were human drinkers. She had decided earlier that if they had her family's trust, then she would accept them wholeheartedly, but she was worried about whether or not they would accept her. The affection for these two had been plain to hear in the few stories that Jasper, Rose, and Emmett had shared to prepare her for their arrival. But as she watched Emmett bounce in anticipation and the wide smile that spread over Rose's face, it finally clicked about how important they were to them. This wasn't simply a convenient bond like the Cullens had been. This was family. A family whose opinions mattered. It had been easy for Jasper, Rose, and Emmett to brush off the disparaging remarks the Cullens had made about her. But would they be able to do the same if Peter and Charlotte found her lacking? Sensing her inner turmoil, Jasper leaned in close and whispered, "They'll love you," in her ear. Bella exhaled shakily as they broke through the thick thicket surrounding the house. As a pair, and squinting against the sun that was shining in her eyes, she could just make out the two figures, one taller and the other shorter by a head. "Hello to boat," the taller and now clearly male one shouted. "Hello to shore," Emmett called back. They approached at the same lazy lope they had obviously traipsed through the woods with, and Bella had the sneaking suspicion it was for her benefit. The stairs creaked as they walked up the steps, and, with the sun finally hidden behind a cloud, Bella got her first good look at them. Her eyes were drawn to the female. Charlotte, she reminded herself. First, or more specifically, the bright red color of her loosely braided hair. An almost exact match to her eyes that brought to mind Ariel from The Little Mermaid. Small stray strands of it curled around the pale skin of her high cheekbones, making it look like it was stained with blood, and the effect managed to be startlingly beautiful. Her glossy pink lips were curled into a welcoming smile as she greeted the others. Her dark red eyes softened with affection as she allowed Rose to pull her into a brief hug. She had a ballet dancer's build, her thin, lithe frame swathed in clothes that managed to be an eclectic mixture of Rose's high-end fashions and Bella's casualness, and she moved with an assuredness that belied the fragility of her China doll features. For some reason, she looked strangely familiar, though Bella knew she had never seen her before, and she tilted her head in contemplation as she mulled it over. It finally clicked when Nan let out a startled laugh behind her and breathed out, "Ruby." If Jet hadn't been in her hands, she would have snapped her fingers and yelled, "Aha," when she realized that, aside from the red eyes, this woman's facial features were an exact mirror to a porcelain doll, affectionately named Ruby, that Nan had owned since she was a little girl. Sadly, the same porcelain doll that an inquisitive and clumsy 4-year-old Bella had accidentally shattered. Though Nan had been devastated at the time, she hadn't hesitated to assure Bella that it was all right, but on occasion, as the years went by, she'd sometimes catch Nan staring at the porcelain dolls in the antique shops she'd like to browse, a forlorn look on her face. She raised a hand to conceal a smile when Nan drifted closer. An odd look on her face. "It's like she's come to life," Nan muttered wistfully, her hands twitching at her side as if they were desperate to reach out and touch her. "Do you think it's possible that she's the model for the doll?" Bella finished. "At this point, I'm starting to believe that anything is possible." She wondered if she'd ever get an opportunity to ask because she was dying to know herself and turned her attention to the male. He was as tall as Emmett and would have been considered lanky if not for the obvious muscle that strained against the gray pullover he wore with faded white letters, scrawling out Sex Pistols across the front. A thick leather strap ran vertically across his chest, and she could just make out what looked like the neck of a guitar covered in the same leather casing over his left shoulder. His hair was a midnight black color, the messy tresses long enough to brush the tops of his thick eyebrows. The strong features of his face were open and honest, handsome despite the silvery scar that intersected his left eyebrow and ran vertical halfway down his cheek. Though his eyes, like the female, were as red as the ones on the field that day, they sparkled with humor and familiarity, almost as if, even though this was the first time they'd met, he still felt like he knew her. She hung back as she watched the 5 of them exchange quick hugs and pleasantries before gulping nervously as 3 sets of gold eyes and 2 sets of red swiveled towards her. Hiya," she waved hesitantly, suddenly transported back to the day she had first met Jasper. She bristled when Peter smirked at her. "She's adorable, Jax," Bella huffed and rolled her eyes. "And feisty, too," he laughed, his smirk transforming into a wide smile that stretched his lips, his straight and slightly sharp-looking white teeth sparkling as brilliantly as his skin did in the sun. "I'll show him feisty," Bella opened her mouth for a retort, but found her lips pulling into a frown when she noticed the dimples that his smile had produced. "It almost looks like—" She darted her eyes quickly between Peter and Emmett. Peter's build was slighter than Emmett's, but the similarity in the facial features, along with the color of Peter's shaggy hair, an exact match to Emmett's shade, was startling. "Are you two—" she started, still shifting her eyes between the two. Peter shook his head reproachfully at her mate. "Jasper didn't tell you?" Bella glared accusingly at Jasper. "He told me a lot, but apparently she shot the same look at Emmett, found it necessary to leave that bit out. "We wanted it to be a surprise," Jasper hedged, no doubt rethinking his decision as he shrunk back from her withering stare. "See if you could put the pieces together," Emmett attempted sheepishly. "Couple of Sherlocks here," Bella grumbled sourly, hiding a smile in the scruff of Jet's fur as Peter chuckled so she could at least pretend to be angry with them for a few more seconds. As hurt as she wanted to be that they hadn't told her the truth, she had to admit that finding out this way was pleasantly amusing. As strange as it sounded, it had always been her little secret that she felt sad on their behalf that they didn't have any family left alive that they knew of, so it warmed her to know that her big brother still had a— What was he exactly? "You were always shit at surprises, Major," he cuffed Emmett lightly upside the head. "And don't even get me started on you." Turning a bright smile back to Bella, he said, "If you want to get technical, Peaches, the name is Peter Whitlock McCarty." He looped an arm around Emmett's wide shoulders, "and I'm this handsome devil's uncle. I was turned about 15 years before he was born. Thank God I had a brother, or the clearly superior McCarty genes would have died with me." Bella blinked. Considering that the two looked almost exactly the same age, her first thought had been brothers. Her mind was having a little trouble comprehending that they were technically separated by 15 years. "Seriously, anything is possible, remember?" Nan called out jovially behind her. Jasper let out a short laugh. "Trust me, we were just as surprised when we found out it was true." The day I met Emmett, he immediately reminded me of Peter, but we didn't officially confirm it till about 10 years ago. We went on Maury and got a DNA test, Peter replied seriously. He memed pulling a slip of paper out of an envelope. When it comes to Emmett McCarty, Peter, you are the uncle. He and Emmett cracked up while Rose and Charlotte rolled their eyes in the background. Bella grinned. Even if the similarity in the looks hadn't already given it away, the mirror personalities said it all. These two were definitely related. So, you watch Maury, huh? She teased. Peter's laughter trailed off as he darted his eyes around nervously. Of course not. What gave you that idea? I don't know. Maybe your spot-on impression. Oprah too, Charlotte chimed. And let's not forget your soft spot for soap operas, Jasper added. Vicious lies, Peter howled, waggling a finger in their directions. They're clearly trying to besmirch my good name. I demand they be sued for libel. He stomped his foot childishly for good measure. Charlotte turned to Rose. Speaking of soaps, she began excitedly. Have you seen the latest episode of Days of the Young and the Beautiful? Can you believe Esmeralda chose Sergi? What are you talking about? Her and Ronaldo ran away together, Peter answered reflexively. Charlotte smirked. Gotcha. Emmett groaned. Man, I can't believe you fell for that. She caught me off guard, Peter replied defensively. Charlotte blew a raspberry in his direction. And you make it so easy, too. As she watched them laugh and joke, Bella felt her smile falter. As happy as she was that they seemed to be genuinely good people, her vampires, a part of her, still felt a little uneasy, like she was intruding on a private moment. From the look, Jasper immediately shot her. He sensed her misgivings, but it was surprisingly Charlotte who stepped forward first, that same soft look in her eyes as she approached Bella. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, aren't we? She said gently. Since our tactless mates have yet to do the honors, I'm Charlotte, but please, she continued with a soft smile, laying a thin, pale hand on Bella's shoulder. Family calls me Char. Bella returned the smile, feeling every last ounce of uneasiness drain from her. And who's this cutie? Bella couldn't stop from taking a step back as Charlotte moved her hand towards Jet, who was still in her arms. Oh my God, she choked out embarrassingly when she saw Charlotte's face fall. I am so sorry, I didn't mean to... She felt tears prickle her eyes, certain that whatever camaraderie that had begun building up between them had just been shattered. Jasper was immediately at her side, a soothing hand cradling her face. It's okay, darlin'. He turned back towards Charlotte. She's never been around human drinkers before. We're not quite sure how she'll react, he explained. Peter snorted. If anything, it's you guys she needs to be afraid of. He shrugged unashamedly at the glares being shot his way. What? You guys are the ones who would make PETA shit in their drawers. Bella barked out a wet laugh. It's horrible, but he's got a point. She stepped hesitantly towards Charlotte, holding out Jet, who was squirming eagerly in her hands, almost in anticipation. And she doesn't seem to have a problem either, she added, depositing her gently in Charlotte's outstretched arms. I really am sorry, she whispered, watching as Jet gave the red-eyed vampire's face a cursory sniff before bestowing a welcoming lick on her patrician nose. It's all right, Charlotte assured her, that same gentle smile finding its way back onto her lips. The herd of deer, 3 moose, 2 mountain lions, and 1 bear, Peter interjected. And 1 bear, Charlotte echoed, that turned tail and ran when they scented us are proof that most animals are terrified of us. So, it'd be understandable if she traced a finger down the dark green collar and tilted up the silver name tag, grinning at the guitar shape. Jet was afraid of us. I'm glad she's not, though. I've always loved dogs. Aren't we forgetting someone? Peter called out, shifting to his immediate right and smiling at the empty space next to him. This must be your lovely grandmother, he gushed, raising his right arm and enthusiastically pumping it up and down in a standard handshake. Emmett, who had wandered closer to Bella's side, leaned in and whispered, Is he? Bella smirked. Not even close. She jerked her head behind her, signaling a laughing Nanson's actual location. But good try, she said, as Peter pouted. Bella found it a little strange that he wasn't reacting with the skepticism that the others had when they first heard about Nan. Even Charlotte seemed unfazed, regarding her with calm, non-judgmental eyes. She tilted her head at him curiously, remembering the basics Jasper had given her on his gift, some sort of knowing ability, though she knew that Emmett had told him about her and Nan. Was it possible that he knew her little oddity before that? Jasper hadn't admitted more than once that he was never 100% sure how Peter's gift worked. So, do you, know everything? Jasper snorted. He likes to think he does. Jealous much? Peter sniffed. Before Jasper could open his mouth to retort, a rumble of thunder echoed in the sky. Bella frowned and looked up, dismayed to see that dark black rain clouds were once again crowding over the sun. 4 whole hours of sunshine, she groused. Must be a record. As Jasper and Rose moved to gather up the various knickknacks that they had all brought out to entertain themselves while they waited, Bella found herself studying Peter again. What? He asked, rubbing self-consciously at his face. Do I have something on my face? No, I'm just trying to picture you covered in tar and feathers. Peter whirled around to face Jasper. You told her that story? He accused. Jasper smirked. You gotta admit, it's a good story. Bella narrowed her eyes at Jasper before matching his smirk with one of her own. Say, Peter, do you have any embarrassing stories about Jasper? Peter's face lit up. You bet your ass I do. Perfect, Bella said, walking to his side and brazenly looping her arm with his. Tell me every single one, and don't leave a single detail out. Bella sat up slowly, stretching and feeling her muscles pull and pop. The night had begun pleasantly enough, with Peter and Charlotte sharing a few stories about their lives and adventures, and then Bella sharing more of her, and by associations, Nat's backstory as well. As the night grew later, though, instead of getting more in detail about how Peter's gift worked, something she had been hoping for since she'd mentioned it on the patio, the conversation had turned to the reason why they had come. As she watched Jasper's face harden and she witnessed more than one dark glare that cut off whatever Peter was going to say, she finally stood up and tightly announced she was going to bed. It was clear that their conversation wasn't going to progress as long as she was in the room, and though a part of her was angry that she was being left out, she still understood that when it came to battle strategy, a word Emmett insisted on throwing around, regardless of Jasper's growing frustration, she was a square in a room full of circles. Still, she couldn't completely mask her irritation, hurt at being shortchanged, and Jasper had ended up following her upstairs, reluctantly admitting he was concerned about exposing her to the darker side of him, the Southern Major side. The same one that had planned and won wars before she was even a thought in the Cosmos' head. Are you worried this is going to change my feelings for you? Make me think less of you? His silence had said it all. Oh yes, she scoffed, unable to stop the mild mockery in her voice. How dare you protect me? I mean, really? How low can you sink? The fight drained from her when he stiffened. I'm sorry, she sighed. That came out a lot bitchier than I meant it to. She crossed their bedroom and snuggled herself in his arms. I just wish you'd understand that I don't just love shy Jasper, or confident Jasper, or gentleman Jasper, or naughty Jasper, or... She placed the palm over his heart where beneath his shirt the largest of his scars lay. Major Jasper. I simply love Jasper in any shape or form, and I will never think any less of you. But I do agree that maybe there are some things I'm better off not being privy to, for the time being at least, she warned. Once Jasper had assured her that nothing would be planned without her knowledge, she had encouraged him to go back downstairs to finish his discussion. Though she had initially had every intention of going to bed, she found herself tossing and turning for hours as she listened to the murmurs of conversation downstairs. Unsettled over the fact that a battle was being planned, a battle where her family could die just below her feet. She had finally fallen into a fitful sleep when she felt the bed dip and Jasper's cool frame curl around her, murmuring soft, unintelligible words of comfort. And now, despite the faint light of a new day shining through the heavy curtains that covered the window and the comforting familiarity of the sounds of banging pans and exuberant conversation drifting through the partially open door, the uneasiness lingered. A part of her wanted nothing more than to lie back down, close her eyes, and pretend it was all a dream. Thank God Jasper wasn't close enough to feel her panic. Shuffling through her later-than-usual morning ritual, Bella pulled on her favorite pair of worn blue jeans and a faded burgundy shirt, with Freddie Mercury's wailing visage on it, slipping a pair of neon orange socks on her feet, the kind with rubber grips on the bottom to keep her from sliding all over the damn wooden floors that seemed to dominate most of the house. She gave her hair a few cursory strokes with her brush and padded softly out of the bedroom. The enticing scent of pancakes drifted up from downstairs, and Bella followed her nose towards the stairs, pausing on the landing when her ears caught the faintest strain of music coming from the direction of the library at the end of the hall. Ignoring the grumble of protest her stomach gave, Bella inched her way down the hall and peeked her head around the half-open door. As soon as she was close enough, Peter was stretched out on the couch that dominated the center of the room, his pale, bare feet propped up on the coffee table in front of him. His face was a mask of serenity. His eyes closed like he didn't have a care in the world as he strummed the strings of the guitar in his lap, gently coaxing out the melodious tune. She suddenly felt Nan at her shoulder, no doubt drawn to the same dulcet tones like Bella had been. "My Will used to have that same look when he played," she whispered, as if her voice would suddenly be heard and break the spell that weaved itself around the room. Worried that she was intruding on a moment, Bella held her breath, foolishly believing that if she stayed still and silent enough, he wouldn't be any the wiser and she could make a clean getaway. Those hopes were dashed when the nameless tune he was playing flawlessly segued into a slightly cheekier tune that Bella recognized when he began singing along in a voice that was as listenable as his guitar playing was. "If I had my little way, I'd eat peaches every day," he trailed off as he looked up, his ruby eyes glowing with humor. Busted, Bella pushed the door all the way open. "Sorry," she apologized sheepishly, shuffling awkwardly in the doorway. "So cool," he said. "What's the point of playing if you don't want anyone to listen?" His lips tilted up in amusement when she remained standing. "You can sit, you know. Nice shirt, by the way." He lowered his guitar enough so she could see Queen stenciled across his chest in cracked yellow lettering. "A man after my own heart," Bella said, moving to the small armchair across from the couch he was sitting on. "Better not let Jasper hear you say that. Don't want to be stealing his girl after only one day. Please, give it a week at least. Let him get used to the idea of us running away together." Bella laughed, rolling her eyes playfully. "Do you always bring along a guitar?" she asked as she settled into the plush cushion. "I never leave home without it, just like my She wrinkled her nose in disgust. "I get it." "Electable mate," he continued like she hadn't tried to cut him off. He smirked when she glared exasperatedly at him. "Why, what did you think I was going to say?" "Mate, huh? I thought we were supposed to run away together," she accused cheekily. He grinned. "The more the merrier, I say." She chuckled, feeling the beginnings of warmth spreading through her heart for the man that was just as easy to talk to as his nephew was. Someone whose personality sparkled as brightly as their skin. She remembered Jasper mentioning familial bond and wondered if that's what this was. Falling silent as she watched him pick at the strings of his guitar. "Thank you," she said suddenly. His fingers paused and he regarded her through a thick curtain of black hair. "For what?" "For what you did for Jasper." He shrugged. "Wasn't aware I did anything." She tilted her head. "Funny, everything that Jackson Emmon told me about you, humble, wasn't exactly a word they used." He chuckled. "Yeah, I can just imagine the words they used." His face grew serious. "You don't need to thank me. I just opened the door. He was the one who chose to walk through it." "I know," she said softly, "but thank you all the same." He nodded, but didn't say anything. Simply positioned his fingers back on the neck. "I'm sorry we haven't met sooner," she blurted, interrupting his movements. "I wasn't trying to keep him from you or anything. I swear I wouldn't do that." Peter chuckled as he held up a hand to stop her nervous rambling. "Whoa, slow your roll, Peaches. Me and Char don't think that at all. We can already tell that controlling Jasper isn't in your nature. And for that, I should probably thank you. Jas was never meant to follow." "Only Lyd, right?" she said, remembering how quickly he had worked his way up the ranks as both a human and a vampire. "Most of the time, sure. But in your case, it's walk beside." She lowered her eyes. "We're not equals. Maybe not in strength, but definitely in heart," he sighed heavily. "If anyone should apologize for not being around, it's me. We should have come earlier, but the timing was never right." "Timing?" she repeated hesitantly. "What does that mean exactly?" "I didn't know when I should come, I guess." She didn't miss the extra emphasis he put on the word no, nor the sardonic twisting of his lips when he said it. "I know that makes me sound more dependent on my gift than I really am, but it's usually good about warning me about the bad stuff." He frowned. "Most of the time." "How does it work?" He frowned. "To be honest, it's never been simple to describe. It's not quite as straightforward as others are, or more specifically, since I'm used to the comparisons," he rolled his eyes. "Alice's. Unlike hers, which she can use to see something as inane as what the new fall line will look like or that the traffic on street whatever will be backed up, mine has caps." Bella frowned. She really sees that stuff. Jasper had told her a long time how Alice's visions worked. Granted, she wasn't really sure if she completely understood it, but it seemed so silly, that she'd willing use it to see something so, well, lame. I know, right? I think that's why it goes to her head like it does. Her desire to know everything about everything makes her a little mad with power. On the other hand, my gift realizes that I could care less about things like that. So, while Jasper might like to say I know everything, it's just not true. He lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I just like to make him think that. Drives him nuts. But as for describing how it works, he trailed off and tapped his chin thoughtfully. Well, if I had to draw comparisons from what you told me about your nan last night, I suppose it's kind of like hers in some ways. You said she gets it seconds before it happens, right? Bella nodded. She said, it's like things click all of a sudden. Sort of like setting up a line of dominoes and watching as they're pushed over. A perfect description, if I ever heard one, Nan remarked. Bella relayed the comment to Peter. I really don't like the comparison, but you know how they say psychics, he grimaced. And I use that word loosely, use open-ended questions and tells as a way to read people. It's kind of like that. I need a word or an event to trigger my gift, like the newspaper article I picked up about the suspicious deaths in Seattle. If I hadn't seen that, chances are I wouldn't have been able to warn you. He must have read the question in her eyes. Am I disappointed that it doesn't work like Alice's? She nodded sheepishly. Not really. Granted, my gift may have its limitations, but her visions are too open-ended. He grinned. Have you ever seen the Clue movie? Remember the 3 different endings? That's almost exactly what her gift reminds me of. But when I get that tickle in the back of my head, it only gives me one. What will definitely happen? It's like having someone who's already read the murder mystery you have in your hands, and leaning over and whispering that the butler did it. Is it really that precise? Well, no, he admitted reluctantly. I'm probably making it sound a little more almighty than it actually is. I don't necessarily see the picture as a whole, just certain parts of it. This situation right now, for example, I knew it was a vampire army that was being built, and I knew that they, or she, I should say, was, his voice softened, coming for you, and that it was going to happen very soon. What happens afterwards, or even during, I'm still unfortunately in the dark about. So, it's not a constant thing, always on like Jasper's. He shook his head. I'll admit there's been a few times when I wished it was, more so in the past, but in the end I decided that would just be annoying. Life's gotta have some mystery after all, especially ours, or it would get boring. The important thing is that I always know enough to keep me and mine alive. She mulled her next question over in her head, concerned it could be considered a little egotistical, but decided to ask anyways. Did you know Jasper was going to meet me? Of course, he boasted proudly. What was the trigger for that exactly? She asked shyly, feeling a blush warm her cheeks at further proof that they were fated to meet. It was a little while after he and She-Devil separated for good. He spent some time with us afterwards and mentioned one day that he didn't think he'd ever find his mate, and then bam, Yahtzee, he crowed. Did you tell him that before it happened? Peter grinned slyly. Where's the fun in that, Peaches? Bella cocked an eyebrow. That was the 3rd time he called her that. What's with the peaches thing, if you don't mind me asking? It's your scent. What you smell like. Ripe peaches. Her brow furrowed as she raised an arm to sniff at her skin where she could still make out the lingering traces of her peach-scented body wash from her shower yesterday. My body wash, you mean? Well, that could accentuate it, yes, but we smell beneath that. Every human has a different scent. Seriously, you guys are like birdie bots. Every flavor human beings. And before you ask, yes, I have smelt a vomit-flavored one. Bella chuckled at the pun. You read Harry Potter, too. He scoffed. I read everything that attempts to describe the supernatural world and laugh at how wrong they are. So, are there really witches? I've met a few at a distance, I should say. No wands, and absolutely batshit crazy. Having any taste of power makes a person go insane. Even vampires? Bella asked cheekily, remembering his earlier line about Alice. Peter tapped his nose and shot her a very convincing, crazy grin. Bella shot him an answering smile as she leaned back, practically giddy that he seemed so willing, and dare she say eager to answer her questions. Jasper had been nothing less than open and honest when he answered any of the questions she'd had in the past. But sometimes she could sense a slight hesitation, especially the issue of blood, which she realized their conversation was currently tiptoeing the line of something she knew had to be addressed sooner or later. She preferred sooner. Did you really meet someone who smells like vomit? He made a face as he nodded. Your scent can alter depending on how hard your lifestyle is, like if you abuse your body in any way. It's almost like a rot that starts from the inside out. It's usually the dregs of society, the ones we hunt. The addicts, rapists, murders, they all reek. And you feed on that? Yes, he replied solemnly. And the taste is as bad as the smell, but that doesn't matter. All that's important is that it's filling. By feeding on humans, we only have to feed about once a week, as opposed to every other day. Does it bother you? He asked seriously. Bella shifted in the chair as she carefully considered her response. I don't know if I can answer that, she admitted, truthfully. It's not exactly a question you ever get asked, you know? She looked down and began fiddling with the frayed knee of her faded jeans. I don't look at the world like I used to, she frowned thoughtfully. Well, to be honest, I've never really looked at the world like a normal person. It was kind of hard to after Nan. I've always kind of seen things in shades of gray since then, instead of black and white, but deep down, obviously I know that killing humans is a bad thing. But killing bad humans, she chuckled lowly. I took a law course last year. One class was a debate about the death penalty. I was on the pro side. My argument was an eye for an eye. Can you believe it? She paused. I'm not saying that you guys playing judge, jury, and executioner is okay, but it'd be different if you were feeding on children or the elderly, for example. She tilted her head back and closed her eyes, letting out a deep sigh. To be honest, that same deep down part of me is telling me I'm being incredibly blasé about the whole thing. But when it comes down to it, to look at you and feel hate or disgust, I would have to feel the same on some level towards Jasper, knowing his history like I do. And frankly, she blinked her eyes open and met his ruby gaze steadily. I'm just not hardwired for that. Peter chuckled softly. Jasper was right. About what? He said you were one of a kind. She shrugged self-deprecatingly. I tried. He strummed a few chords on his guitar, his eyes foggy with thought, before his hand came down heavily on the strings, cutting off the sound. What about your grandmother? He said, his words coming out in a rush. Bella's brows furrowed. Nan, what about her? He rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. What's her opinion about us? Bella studied his face, startled when she saw the worry in his eyes, and realized that he was seriously concerned about what she thought. These vampires are definitely an unusual breed, Nan murmured thoughtfully. To think that he truly cares what an old dead woman thinks about him. Bella shifted to the side when Nan drifted over to perch herself on the arm of her chair, watching as Peter straightened up as his eyes followed her movement. She's here now, isn't she? She is. Tell him exactly what I say, chimed, Nan ordered sternly. Bella tilted her head down as she listened to Nan speak, absorbing her words and thinking of the best way to present them. She sighed heavily as she met his wary gaze. Nan did say she wanted her to repeat them exactly. She admits that she's uneasy, not for her obviously, but for me. Her heart clenched when he lowered his eyes in shame, but she swallowed and continued. She may have had good experiences with golden-eyed vampires, but the ones in the field that day haven't exactly set her mind at ease for red-eyed ones, or the own experience she had with one. Her own experience? Peter echoed. Bella leaned forward when the black of his pupils expanded until they almost overtook the red before they were back to normal so quickly. She wondered if she imagined it. She was attacked by a vampire when she was younger, wasn't she? How did you... She trailed off when his lips tilted in a small, self-satisfied smirk. Of course, she said, rolling her eyes at her own brain fart. But yes, you're right, and let's say both of them paved the way for wariness. He nodded sharply. Understandable. As for your feeding habits, she cleared her throat uneasily as Nan prodded her to continue. This is actually the first time I've ever heard this story, so she inhaled deeply. About 30 years ago, there was a little girl in her neighborhood that she used to babysit for that was raped and killed. They caught the guy that did it, but he ended up being released on a technicality. Nan ran into him accidentally a few years later and said that if there weren't a handful of witnesses around and she didn't have a husband and 2 kids at home, she would have killed him on the spot without a smidge of remorse. Nan finished. Bella blinked, wide-eyed up her and the venomous resolve in her voice. To hear such a deadly threat come from such a gentle and fun-loving woman was a bit overwhelming. Killed him on the spot without a smidge of remorse, she repeated monotonically after a short, awkward silence. Peter whistled lowly. Brutal, he said appreciatively. Bella smiled wryly. She said she's probably romanticizing it by turning you and Shar into some sort of noble vigilantes, she shrugged. But she says the thought helps ease her mind. Peter lowered his eyes. We tried feeding on animals once, when Jasper got in touch with us again. He shifted uneasily. We thought it'd make it easier on him, but we... Stop, Bella ordered gently. You don't have to defend yourself or your, well, diet. Peter nodded, but still looked ashamed. Good Lord, shame. Hug that man, Nan huffed as she glided over to his hunched form. Before he makes me cry, I'd do it myself, but... She waved her arms, frowning, as they easily passed through his form. Bella rose from her chair and took a seat beside him on the small couch. Would it be weird if I hugged you right now? Peter raised his head. Hug, he repeated, as if baffled by the concept. Bella shrugged. Nan's orders. His lips quirked in a small grin. Yes, ma'am, he said, as he pulled the guitar strap over his head and sat the instrument to the side, encouraging her closer. He pulled her into a loose hug. I guess Nan must trust you after all, Bella mused. Seeing as how she encouraged me to let you get up close and personal with my jugular. Peter snorted into the soft skin of her neck. Smart ass, he said dryly, as she pulled back. Bella smiled brightly as she caught the indulgent look in Nan's eyes from behind his shoulder as she mumbled softly to herself. Her smile transformed into a laugh when she caught the tail end of Nan's muttering. What? Peter asked. I'm quite certain Nan likes you now. Why's that? You've just been nicked. Is that some way of saying you just stole my wallet? He patted his pockets jokingly. No, nicknamed. Oh yeah, Emmon told me about that. So, he said, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. What'd I get? Bella smiled, angelically. I don't know if you want to know. What is it? He asked again, the beginnings of trepidation in his voice. The smile became a wicked grin. It's quite sweet, actually. He groaned. Don't tell me it's something the guys are going to give me hell for. Oh, don't worry. It'll be our little secret. She crossed her fingers behind her back and leaned in close. Pumped.